to raise regarding this morning's meeting. One is that item 12 has been withdrawn. It requires further professional officer input, and an updated report will be brought back as soon as possible. And the other is that we have an additional paper being brought forward on Clinger School, and that will be a paper presented, and we'll have a short recess to give members an opportunity to go over that at the appropriate time. Councillor Lever.
Thank you, Chair. Can it just be noted that on behalf of the Labour Group, it's very unhelpful to have all these bits of paper coming in separately. A lot of it's not numbered. We've got appendices which don't have paper numbers, etc. So, it's just a bit like matching up the cards. If we could actually address that and make sure that we do get coloured copies, certainly within the copies of the papers which go to members of this committee, actually bound into it rather than coming through separately, together with additional reports which aren't numbered in the main text as well. It just doesn't help at all.
No, just apologies, Chairman, for yourself. Your points are noted coming up to the recess, and we'll incorporate these improvements in papers following the recess, and the points well made. Thank you.
Thanks very much. If we can go to apologies, please.
Morning, Chairman. Yes, I have 3 apologies. Councillor Hislop, Councillor Carson and Councillor Geddes. There are 15 members present.
Thank you. Item 2 on the agenda, declarations of interest. No declarations of interest. Item 3 on the agenda, minute of the meeting of the 20th of June 2013 for approval. Members happy with those minutes? Thank you. Item 4 on the agenda, Community and Customer Services Budget 2013-14, a report and presentation by Director of Community Services. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks, Chair. Members, attached to your report today, you have 2 appendices. Appendix 2, which is the draft activity-based budget for CCS, and Appendix 1, which is the budget process for the corporate budget process for 2014-15, as previously agreed. Just going to give you a brief high-level summary in this presentation today of the proposed CCS budget, including what I'm going to briefly cover is budget analysis of expenditure and income, statutory responsibilities, agreed indicative savings, service reviews, and key challenges. If I could start with, therefore, with budget analysis and particularly expenditure. As you'll see from there, the CCS has a controllable budget, expenditure budget of 22 net budget, 22.174 million, spread over 8 business units, as summarised on page 22 of your papers. What I've done here is analyse that expenditure slightly differently, showing integrated customer services altogether and grants, external commissions, and health and wellbeing funding together. So 27% of the net controllable budget for CCS is spent on leisure and sport and community facilities, and 17% on grants, commissions, etc., and revenues and benefits, 17%, and so on through the slide. In addition to this controllable expenditure, there's also one strategic commission that CCS have on community safety services, which is delivered by DG First, an additional 1.016 million, which is shown on page 23 of your papers. Looking at expenditure a slightly different way by type, you'll see here that this slide shows you that staff costs represent 56% of CCS expenditure, gross expenditure this is now. Payments to other bodies, which I'll come on to a bit later, 21%. And then property transport 13%, supplies and services 10%, with a gross expenditure of £30 million and a total income of just under £8 million. So moving on to staff costs, what this slide shows you is a staff breakdown by type, and by type here, what we're saying is salary bands. So bands 1 to 9 being the lowest band, bands 10 to 12 tending to be team leaders, and middle managers, and then service managers and senior managers. As you can see, the change there from 12-13 to 13-14, the trend is downwards. We do have some one-off increases in the current year due to Scottish Welfare Fund staffing and other short-term temporary positions. The service manager increase includes 2 temporary posts at the present time, and the other 18 other posts is largely former Annandale and Estill Sports and Leisure Trust staff who are still on the old terms and conditions, and they should move across to the new conditions following the Leisure and Sport Facilities Service Review, which is underway at the moment. And staff breakdown in terms of costs and by staff numbers by service type shows that 30% of staff are in leisure and sport and community facilities, 23% in customer services, and 21% revenues and benefits, and so on down the slide. Moving on to the other main area of expenditure, payments to other bodies, which is 21% of costs. You'll see there that the top 3 areas within that expenditure are benefits, Scottish Welfare Fund, which is 28%, area committee grants, civic pride accounting for 27%, and information advice services for 26%. But there is more detail on payments to other bodies in pages 69 and 70 of your papers. Moving on then from expenditure to income, this slide gives you an income breakdown for 13-14. As I said previously, a total income is just under £8 million. Fees and charges account for 63% of that, and I'll come on to a bit more detail on that in a minute. Government grants, 22%, and then other grants and internal recharges. Fees and charges income is split on this slide across the different services. 61%, as you'll see there, for leisure and sport and community facilities, and 25% for customer services, which is largely registration income. So those two account for 86% in total of fees and charges income. So that's given you an analysis, high-level analysis of expenditure and income. Statutory responsibilities, I said I'd touch on. The key statutory responsibilities for CCS are registration of births, deaths and marriages, and revenues and benefits. Beyond that, services provided by CCS are largely discretionary. The Local Government Act in Scotland, as everybody will know, places duty for adequate provision of recreational, sporting, cultural provision, etc. And there is a new CLD statutory instrument due out shortly that will place additional duties on the council in terms of providing a CLD plan for the area. But generally, there's significant discretion on how responsibilities are met, including the level of service. Just to recap on decisions that were made in the terms of CCS agreed and indicative savings, when the council set its budget on the 7th of February, the left-hand column showing you the agreed savings across the different services, and 14, and then in the right-hand column, the indicative savings across some of those services. CCS service reviews are shown on this slide. As members will know, the top 2 leisure and sport facilities and culture review were agreed in Policy and Resources Committee in June, in terms of the scope being agreed. And we're also proposing to bring forward, or intending to bring forward in the autumn, a scoping paper for a CLD service review that would encapsulate the adult learning indicative saving for 14-15 So when you put the 3 service reviews together with the integration of customer services, it really means that just about all services delivered by the department are covered through that work, except for revenues and benefits and DG Direct. In terms of revenues and benefits, we're obviously waiting really for the impact of universal credit to become clear. As members will probably be aware, the government announced its rollout of the next phase of pilots just this week, and Inverness is the only pilot in the next phase with it in Scotland. So at the moment, the demands on revenues and benefits are extremely high, and so any review of that service would really need to follow from once the full impact of universal credit is understood. And in terms of DG Direct, there will be more scope in the future for more efficient use of staff resources once we've been able to work through the introduction of automation for some incoming calls, and once that's fully tested and ready to implement, which we anticipate would be next year. Finally, just to summarise with some ongoing challenges and opportunities, and these are very much reflected in reports that this committee has already seen, or in the refreshed business plan, which is coming to committee later on the agenda. So service demand particularly increasing around revenues and benefits, Scottish Welfare Fund and DG Direct services. We're looking to invest in services in those particular areas, so customer service and feedback, technology in the web, particularly in terms of self-service and ongoing development of the customer relationship management system, service review and improvement through the service review programme, integration and efficiency, of course, and staff development through leadership development and development of our staff's management skills and technical skills, and lastly, stronger partnerships through working more effectively with our partners and developing new partnerships where shared benefits can be achieved. And finally, of course, maximising the potential of the property that the council is responsible for and other assets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members' questions? Councillor Dick.
Could I just ask the Director about the staff numbers that he put up there? According to the activity-based budget book, there are 938, which is just short of 300 more than was displayed on that screen. Could you reconcile that?
Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. The staff numbers obviously need to be looked at in terms of actual staff numbers and full-time equivalents. Certainly the full-time equivalents, which is the figures I was putting up at the bottom there, 938 staff in terms of people, but 666 full-time equivalents. And that 666 equates with the figure across the various services in the APP document.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. It's on the staffing figures again. Initially, obviously one of the savings that was agreed in the budget last year or earlier this year was £50,000 management savings, but looking at the figures on staffing, it would appear that the number of higher band staff has actually increased and the lower band staff has actually decreased. Now that seems to me not to be management cuts that are taking place at the moment. It seems to be lower paid staff that are being cut, and I think that's reflected certainly in the integration process. I'm wondering why the higher band staffing levels have increased and the actual cut is at lower band staffing. On the issue of the budget, I think one of the poorest decisions, frankly, that was taken by the administration was to agree a budget that said officers can simply go off and do what they like in terms of finding £126,000 savings in integration and £200,000 savings in community facilities. The reality is, if councillors are not frankly prepared to make that decision at a committee, then frankly they shouldn't be in administration. That was a poor decision, and frankly pretending to consult with ward members, but actually accepting that the final decision will be made by officers and officers alone is not frankly the way we should make decisions.
Can I ask, in terms of the figures for next year's savings, is the department in a position to treat that like a service review and actually bring forward detailed proposals by September when it comes to the indicated figures for community facilities and integration for the following year? Can that be done in advance so that when councillors are making decisions and budgets, we can put that in our budget and we can make the final decision and we can take the responsibility for those particular decisions? I'd also, maybe the Chair can clarify whether or not the administration actually support the proposals that are being brought forward, because I think at the moment there's a bit of confusion out there. That on the one hand, people are quoted in the press saying, now that I voted for this, but now that I see it on paper, I think it's nonsense, and I don't really know what that means, because ultimately the decision rests with officers, so I'm unclear exactly whether those proposals will go ahead. It'd also be helpful if somebody could tell me what the proposals are for the wider Dumfries area. I've got my proposals for my ward for Dumfries, but I still don't know what the actual detailed proposals are when it comes to community facilities in the rest of the town of Dumfries, because nobody's actually told me that yet, so it'd be helpful to get that. The other savings options that was agreed with no detail was obviously the reduction in adult education, £150,000 for this year, and obviously an indicated figure for 225 being suggested in the full year. Can I ask, has that saving been reached? Have we agreed the proposals, or rather have officers agreed what the proposals are going to be to make that savings? And at some point, are members of this committee actually going to get told where those savings are going to be made? Because again, I have no idea at all, despite being on the committee that's supposed to scrutinise a department. I have no idea where the £150,000 savings being made. And can I just ask, on the previous two that I referred to, are we on track to make those savings? Will we make £126,000 savings when it comes to integration in this financial year? And will we make the £200,000 savings on community facilities in this financial year? And will that be actually met at the end of the financial year? In relation to the service review, I think it's helpful that you've actually brought forward proposals on service review so far for culture and also for sport and leisure. I think I'm looking at education committee papers the other day there, and they seem to have decided to exempt themselves from service reviews and the actual budget setting process, despite the fact that it was agreed by full council. So you've obviously got two service reviews agreed already, Justin, but I'm a wee bit concerned on the time scale for the CLD service review. Obviously the budget setting process allowed for that service reviews to be effectively completed over sort of July, August, September time and reported back to committee in September, and that gave members sufficient time to build any decisions into the actual budget setting process and the delivery of draft budgets in December. But I'm a bit concerned as to what the timetable is for the CLD budget. I'm not entirely clear when that will get agreed by committee and when we'll actually get the outcome of the detailed service review. So it would be helpful to get an update on that.
Okay, thank you. And so far as the administration and the decision was concerned in respect of properties, the administration determined, and quite rightly in my opinion, that it was for professional officers to make determinations around properties and how those could be better managed and which properties would become a greater liability to this council sooner rather than later, and which would be more efficiently utilised in the future. But can I hand over to Mr Tracy on the other questions that you raised?
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, just picking up on management costs, the department saved just over £1 million in management costs between 10-11 and 12-13. And that was particularly at the top four levels management. So that was director, head of service, service manager and principal officer. I think that these figures are presented slightly differently in the sense that bands 10 to 12 particularly don't just become principal officers, but some of the team leader posts below that. But certainly it's possible to provide historical information going back over a longer period to demonstrate the reduction in management that particularly 10, 11, 11, 12 was undertaken in the department. We're still, as members will be aware, the savings of 140,000 in the current year on management and other staff costs, and so there are some small reductions in management that have been made and will be made either have been made since the beginning of the year or will be made over the coming weeks to ensure that savings delivered. Secondly, moving on to the integration of community facilities in year 2, yes, certainly we'd be able to bring forward more detailed proposals in relation to consideration of indicative savings by the council in September, so that will certainly be possible. We can certainly ensure that all members receive all the information in terms of for the whole of Dumfries. All Dumfries members receive that information. Indeed, all members receive that information for the whole of Dumfries in terms of what's being taken forward on current savings. In terms of adult education, the savings will be delivered there. The staff teams are working through exactly the application of those savings at the moment, and Harry Hay informed me just last week that he'd be getting something out to members within the next few days once each staff team had completed that. We've certainly been working very hard to minimise the impact on services of those savings. There are some early retirements involved, some deletion of vacant posts, and some back office costs being reduced, as well as some reduction in payments to other bodies. So I'm not saying there won't be any impact on services, but that will be set out to members within the next few days. Unfortunately, Harry's dealing with a family illness just at the moment, so that will probably be next week, I think, before that comes out. In terms of delivering on savings, we'll certainly deliver on the 126k integrated customer services savings. In terms of the community facilities, we're not quite there yet. We're most of the way there, but slightly short in terms of, at this stage, in terms of delivering on the savings for the current year. But we can certainly keep committee updated on progress in that respect. In terms of the timing of the CLD service review, we've been kind of anxious to make sure that the scope of the review reflects the statutory instrument once it's published, and indeed, ideally, that we know that the sort of final content of the community empowerment bill that we understand is forthcoming, but recognise that we will need to bring a scope forward, certainly by September at the latest, in order to then allow that service review to take place over the rest of this financial year. But I think there will be some savings that emerge from that service review for 14-15, but it may be that the greater benefits or the greater savings feed through into 15-16. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair, and I note your confirmation of the support for the proposals. I think that clarifies things, because there was certainly an element of confusion out there that the individual ward members of the administration were telling community groups they were opposed to the proposals, but you've obviously confirmed that that's not the actual case. Justin touched on the issue around payments to other bodies as well in relation to CLD's service review. And one of the things that I'm concerned about in terms of the information that's contained here today is, in the past, the ABB has actually detailed what the payments have been for this department in relation to other bodies. So you could work out that we gave £102,000 to Third Sector Interface, we gave X amount to all these organisations. That appears to have been completely excluded from this report, so all we've got is frankly multi-million pound figures of payments to outside bodies. Now, that to me is a step backwards. I would like to know exactly where we spend our money, not where a sort of ballpark figure of 1.2 million or 1.3 million in terms of outside bodies. I'd like to get that information. I'd like to know exactly where that money goes. And it raises the other issue of what is becoming an increasing part of the department's budget, which is in relation to commissions. Now, I can see exactly where we spend the money in leisure and sport, but I have no idea at all where the £200,000 goes when it comes to commissioning arts, for example. I have never seen a report that tells me what that money has been spent on. I know that it was agreed to give that money, but I don't know exactly what happens to it. Likewise, there's the whole issue around benefits, which is a massive issue at the moment as a result of welfare reform. I know there's a big chunk of money goes to DAGCAS, but again, I've never had it reported back in detail as to what that commission actually means. But I've seen the report, it's up for a commission again. Well, I've no idea how the first one went, never mind what's going to happen in the future. There is not a reporting back performance mechanism when it comes to commissions, and more of this council's money is going towards commissions, but we're not scrutinising the performance of those organisations that we're actually giving money to. And I'm concerned that as we move to even more commissions, that frankly we're just going to sit here and maybe hand out a cheque at the beginning of the year and hope for the best, because there is no real reporting back mechanism when it comes to these commissions. And I would like to know when we're getting a report back on the money we spend in Arts Commission, and likewise in relation to DAGCAS as well.
Thank you. Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, the Arts Commissions, as Councillor Smith has alluded to, the decision, or the authority was delegated to the head of service to award those commissions by committee. There is a report due to be reported back on the outcome of those awards, and I believe I'm right in saying that will come forward to the September meeting of this committee. But I can certainly ensure that all members receive at the very least some summary information in advance of that kind of sets out I think there's 8 or 10 commissions and what they cover and who they've been awarded to, at least, so members have that information in advance of that committee. In terms of the DAGCAS commission, obviously the commission was agreed by this committee. It was seen as being a strategic commission and therefore came to committee. We have been reporting back on performance through the 6 and 12 month performance reports on the KPIs that DAGCAS contribute to, but fully accept that a more detailed monitoring report will need to come back in due course, which I imagine will be either the next meeting or the one after. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Just obviously on the point in relation to payments to outside bodies, that seems to have been excluded from the ABB information. And again, just in terms of commissions, £200,000 was obviously stripped from the discretionary funds. I think it was called Civic Pride by the administration. And we have no idea what's happened to that. This was partly for commissions as well, but there's £100,000 sitting there for area committee commissions, and I have no idea what's happening with that. And likewise, I think there was £100,000 stripped out for burial grounds as well. And again, we're 6 months into the financial year almost, and I've absolutely no idea where that money is and what's planned for it. And again, it comes back to commissions. Apparently it's going to go in that, I'm told.
Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, in terms of the apologies for missing the payment to outside bodies point. Certainly, the information on pages 69 to 70 is in a similar format to the previous ABB document. We can certainly provide more detailed information to members if that would be helpful in terms of some of the how some of that money, particularly around CLD services, I think you referred to, Councillor Smith, is spent. So that can certainly be provided if that would be helpful. In terms of apologies, your second point, Councillor Smith, was in relation to the...
Obviously, one of the decisions was to take £200,000 from Civic Pride discretionary funds and put it into commissioning by area committees and burial grounds, and I've never seen any reports on that. I just wonder what happened to that.
Yeah. Proposals for that funding are being worked up by Harry Hay in conjunction with DG First, so I would expect a report again to come back shortly to members on that. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, just to concur with the remarks made by Colin, Councillor Smith, in terms of the competence of delegating it to officers. Indeed, as the non-aligned group in the Council, we are questioning that in another place as to the competence while we're waiting on that decision back or advice back. It definitely wasn't a good practice in terms of members' accountability. And indeed, at the area committee in the West, 4 of the administration councillors then complained about the process and made heavy criticism of it, which was a bit disingenuous, given they had delegated it to officers in the first place, as you confirmed today. So the competence of that is very much under question. Could I move on to the integration, Chair, where there's 126k and the 200k? in terms of community facilities, which again Councillor Smith has questioned, and I would question further in terms of the community facilities. Then since the budget was set, I believe there has been a reinstatement figure lodged with the Council, which will cost, in the report that we got, a figure circa of £150,000 to reinstate the previous rented building in Stranraer, with a further year's rent of £60,000, which takes that to 210 and perhaps above in terms of figures that were not reported to members, that, or at least of my knowledge. So again, I would question the director on both those accounts in terms of the 200k projected savings, with a reinstatement of circa 150k and a £60,000 rent to the property owner. Also, on integration, I note that the remarks made by the director in terms of early retirement, and in the report I do not see any reference to the report being put before the trade union side. My understanding is that they have serious concerns about the early retirement as to whether it is actually an early retirement against a compulsory redundancy, and there may be an at risk in terms of the process being pursued under early retirement as against compulsory redundancy, where it may be pursued as an unfair dismissal on the grounds of redundancy. And if I could be comment on that one, I believe the trade union side are in negotiations and discussion with the department on that issue. And again, turning to what has been referred to by the director, the demands are extremely high on revenues and benefits, and my understanding was that in the introduction of discretionary housing payment for this year, then there was an excessive amount of applications, and indeed there was a backlog where the department had to deploy staff in to deal with a number of discretionary housing payments, which effectively then put community care grants and other grants at a loss in terms of backlog and falling behind on time for the deliberation of those grants, both in discretionary housing payment in the first instance, before staff were redeployed or deployed into that department, that sector, and then in community care. And really it's in reference to the remarks, have we got the resources to deal with this, given that some of the discretionary housing payments were only awarded up to September, and we may see a further application for discretionary housing payments coming forward, and whether we have staffed up to the extent to make sure that we are on top of that and meeting targets so that people get an instant reply, or as soon as possible anyway.
Thank you. Mr Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. I think I'd need to clarify with Councillor Scobie first, if I could, in terms of the property he's referring to, the leased property. I'm not sure exactly which one he's meaning.
The one that social work came out of in George Street in Stranraer.
Chair, I don't have information on that particular property here. That's obviously in relation to office accommodation, which would be managed by Strategic Property Services. I can certainly take that query back and ask for them to clarify the position with you, but I don't have that information here.
Thank you. And the question around welfare reform and...
Yes, there's a second question, well, a comment made in relation to early retirement. We've certainly been working very closely with the joint trade unions, met with them yesterday as part of regular meetings around the various changes that departments taking forward at the moment, and as well as issues around DG1 welfare reform and so on. So I'm certainly not aware that from the trade unions at all that they consider any early retirements to be potentially unfair dismissal. That isn't an issue that's been raised in those terms with me at all. In terms of the workload for discretionary housing payments, not just discretionary housing payments, but Scottish Welfare Fund as well. Certainly we have reported now twice to the Welfare Reform Subcommittee the extreme levels of demand that we've had, and we've had to adjust the staffing levels within the team that deals with both those areas, and we have done that, and we're matching demand with resources at the present time, but certainly keeping it very closely under review and monitoring any trends as that may change, and as Councillor Scobie rightly says, that that may change during the course of the year, and we certainly need to keep on top of that. I think we had no real way of knowing in terms of beyond the information that we were given by the DWP before the transfer of the Scottish Welfare Fund took place. We had no real way of knowing what anticipated demand would be like, and so we've had to react quickly in terms of the levels that there have been so far.
Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, just to come back, and I'm surprised that the Director does not know about the property in Stranraer. Indeed, we raised it with the Chief Executive no later than last Thursday and drew attention to this. So it is, I think we do need a report back while, there is a complaint being lodged. But we do need the report in terms of the information that members were provided with, and indeed this marked against the savings of 200k. So I would hope that this one is the subject of a report back on that issue.
Thank you, Chief Executive.
Nice to hear this question asked twice, even though he was told to get a response. It's not part of Justin's budget. It's not 200,000, as was explained to the member. That's part of the corporate saving. If he wishes to raise the matter with the Director of Chief Executive Service later on the agenda, fine. But the information would come back to members as we're investigating it. It does not form part of the 200,000 in relation to this Director's responsibility and other decision-making process. Helpful information, and we did promise to bring information back, and if a report is necessary, it will come back to Policy and Resources. But please do not ask the Director if it's something that's not part of his responsibility.
Thank you, Chief Executive. Councillor Dykes.
Thank you, Chair. It was actually on the back of something that Councillor Smith asked, and it was to do with civic pride, but I was actually going to address it under item 6 on the paper, so if that's okay with you, I'll just wait until then.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to 3.9, page 16. On the basis of what has been previously said, do we now have an assurance that these potential savings will come back to members for final decision?
Thank you. Mr. Tracy.
Chair, sorry, I'm just looking at 3.9 here. Can you clarify, sorry, Councillor McComb, if you wouldn't mind, exactly which savings you're referring to? Yeah.
I'm referring to the identification of potential savings, which is stated in that paragraph.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. This is in relation to the Commission services. Yes, that they would certainly come back through the committee process without a doubt. Yes. Yeah. At this point in time, there's no. I think that would feature as part of the budget process, budget development for 2014-15. Yeah.
Would they come back as a range of options?
I would expect so, but I think that really depends how the budget process for 14-15 develops on through the coming months. But I would expect so, yes.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of matters. The first one at the top of page 39, I'll use that as an example. The SIP for a rating review, that's mentioned in a lot of these papers with regard to benchmarking. Now, at one time, elected members used to get issued with a SIP for a rating review. It's quite a handy document to have. Could I have an assurance that will now be reissued to members as it was in the past? It's a very good comparator for comparing services in this authority with services elsewhere. That's the first question. I'll let that one.
Thank you. Can I ask Mr Garrett to answer that question, please?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, certainly we can make the information that we've used for the benchmarking purpose in the document available to members. We'll make sure that's done. Can I maybe just quickly, Chair, come back to the previous question in terms of paragraph 3.9? The point being made there is that where services identify potential savings, it's for the commissioning committee rather than the delivery committee to consider the details of the options in relation to those savings. So the point being made there is that it's for policy and resources to consider savings on community safety rather than DG first. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy.
Thanks for that. The next matter is next page, page 40, and it refers to data zones. Now, just recently, the licensing board has been having meetings with the health board concerning these data zones. Apparently, these data zones are determined by the Scottish Government, and there's 35 within this authority. The unfortunate thing is that what the Scottish Government have named as these data zones bear no relationship to what we would recognise as communities in Dumfries and Galloway. There's one, for instance, called Nithside and Nunham, which would appear to be the town centre with the addition of the Nunham area and Nithside from the other side of the river. That's a data zone. There's various other ways they've divided these data zones up, and I don't think they're probably the best way of recognising certainly deprivation and certain other factors within Dumfries and Galloway. The point was made to the health board, but they made the point back that these were determined by somebody in the Scottish Government who's obviously got absolutely no knowledge whatsoever of the geographic layout of Dumfries and Galloway. So I take some of this with a pinch of salt, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chair. It's similar to Councillor McComb's question. Just picking up on that really, and I'd put a question mark over it. It shows us that June, July, that we'll get to this point of this meeting here today. In September, it says that then officer development of service reviews, particularly those where savings are required for 2014-15, and then it says then after that, officer development of savings options out with service reviews based on direction provided by political groups. Just if you could kind of put that into context, how that'll roll in then coming back into October, just the September-October boxes. I'm interested to hear what the process is there. My understanding is that we'll give clear political direction through liaison with the officers, and that will come back in October at some point leading into November.
Thank you. Can I ask Mr Garrett again, please?
If you remember last year's budget process, it was developed largely by individual political groups liaising with the relevant services and asking for savings options to be developed. That process has not been removed from the budget arrangements for this year. It's just that it's now supported also by the service review programme. So there's still a case that the service committees will agree the remits for the service reviews. There's also a need for individual political groups to also liaise with service departments on other non-service review savings that they'd like to see brought forward.
Thank you. Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. The point Councillor Smith made about the payments to outside bodies, I would actually have expected the kind of detail that he was asking for within these templates. PH&E have provided in the RIBB, and I think it's absolutely essential that we have a detailed breakdown of payments to outside bodies. Can I just ask if my recollection is correct that templates 16 and 18, when we tabled the budget on 18th December and agreed it in February, both budgets which were tabled comprised templates 16 and 18 with reference to CCS properties. And could I just sort of say, as long as I've been in this council, we've been asking for a comprehensive asset management strategy which frankly, if it had been implemented many years ago, we wouldn't be asking for the kind of savings that we have to do now, because it's a kind of operational thing that any competent business, when it's looking at its operational matters, should be doing as a matter of course. Property management, asset management is absolutely essential to any competent running of any business. And as I say, if we'd done it several years ago, we might not have been looking at 10 million savings this year.
Thank you. Councillor McClellan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's regarding Councillor McCaughtrey's comments regarding data zones. I have some sympathy with his point of view, but we'd just like to point out that the 976 data zones that were used in 2012 were the same as those used in 2004, when it was the previous Scottish Executive.
Okay, thank you. Can we go to the recommendations? 2.1, we've received the presentation, ABB, information and associated budget estimates for community and customer services from the Director of Community Customer Services. And 2.2, review and agree the Community and Customer Services Budget 2013-14 as detailed Appendix 2 to this report. A number of items or reports were asked to be brought back. Can I just clarify, Mr. Crine?
Thank you, Chairman. I understand the decision of the committee was to identify 6 items: the CLD scoping and anticipated outcomes review to come to the autumn committee, a breakdown of outside bodies, thirdly to receive the information on Dumfries community facilities, the information on the scrutiny and performance of commissions, specifically DAGCAS, the details of the Civic Pride £100,000 expenditure, and finally the SIPFA rating reviews. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much. Councillor Smith.
There was one other item that referred to, and I don't know whether that's something that will come back to the Labour group individually as part of this political direction nonsense, or it's something that will come to this committee, but it was very specifically in relation to the proposed savings for the following year in relation to integration and community facilities. Just for Councillor Dick's benefit, and I'll provide him with the transcript, the Labour group proposal on templates 16 and 18 was very different from the administration. We made it clear that the proposal should come before Policy and Resources Committee, and this committee should decide it. Your amendment was that it would be referred to officers and there would be consultation, whatever that means, with ward members. So it was very, very different proposals. We are not prepared to go down that route again next year. I think it's an insult to the communities involved that you should effectively carry out these changes in secret. Now, I'm quite happy for the proposals for the following year to come before this committee in September, as I asked, or I'm quite happy for those detailed proposals to go to the Labour group when it comes to us determining our draft budget. But what I'll make absolutely clear is we will not support what the administration supported, which was effectively to go into this blind.
I appreciate that we have agreed a process, both Labour group and the administration, and as such we will work towards our respective budget outcomes.
The process, if you read the process, it says that service reviews to be agreed at these service committees. Now what I'm saying is that the community facilities for the following year and integration for the following year should be treated as effectively a service review, and that information should come to us in September in the same way that the Arts and Museum service reviews come in September, the same way that Sport and Leisure is coming in September. I'm putting that forward as a proposal. I'd like to think that others would support that as well. If not, I'm happy for that information to come to the Labour group and we'll deal with it as part of a budget setting process, but we will set out entirely where we think those savings should be made. If we do take those savings the following year, we won't go down the route again of simply saying go and find £500,000 and let people know about it through the local press.
The agreed way forward, as I understand it, was for the Labour group as well as others to have the opportunity to discuss with officers and attain the appropriate information as they request it. And I see no alteration to that decision. Sorry?
I've requested is detailed proposals as to where the savings will be made next year, and Justin obviously indicated that he could prepare that information. I'm asking where that information will go. Will it come to this committee, or will it simply just go to the Labour group?
Thank you. Mr. Crichton.
Thank you, Chairman. My understanding is the Council's agreed budget process, which is attached as Appendix 1. In September, there is a requirement for the indicative savings that were identified in 4 14-15 to be brought back to this committee. So it will be brought back to this committee, and clearly there will be ongoing dialogue with political groups in addition to coming to committee. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, it's just in clarification under 2.2 on the advice proffered by the Chief Executive. I think he said that this was not the responsibility of this Director, but indeed the Chief Executive with property portfolio department under that. So will this be taken under item 8 in terms of the property liability that was not reported?
That's a question you can raise and would be quite appropriate at that time. Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, Director's End of Year Assessment of Business Plan Performance, Community and Customer Service. Mr Tracy, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual performance report for Community and Customer Services. You have 3 appendices in the report. Appendix 1, which is the overall summary of performance, and you're being asked to review that. Appendix 2 contains a number of exception reports, and you're being asked to scrutinise those. And Appendix 3 is the proposed amendments to targets, and you're being asked to agree those. Section 3.5 of the report on pages 74 and 75 provides the committee with a high-level analysis against each of the department's objectives that were agreed as part of the CCS business plan for 2012-15, which was, I think, last August, committee agreed that. I think overall there's some areas of strong performance across the department, but also a number of areas where improvement needs to be made, building on the experience of the last 12 months. Chair, I'm obviously happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's just in relation to the exception report on percentage of days lost per employee through sickness and absence. Certainly in education, and I think in social work, they've gone through a programme of offering flu vaccinations, which has been very successful in reducing the number of absences, and I just wonder if this particular service has offered the same thing, which may help, because I know that a lot of it is customer facing and a lot of contact with members of the public, where you're more likely to pick up bugs and germs as you would do in a school or in a social work scenario. So it was just clarification on whether that's offered to your staff.
Thank you. Mr Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. It isn't offered to CCS staff at the moment. I'm aware, certainly from education, that this is an initiative that they've taken, I think, for a few years now, and it is certainly something that I'm sure, in terms of continuing to manage down absence, we will certainly look at. There is a cost attached to it, so we need to kind of balance that with the benefits that we'll achieve. But we'll certainly give consideration to that, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
I don't know whether you'll be able to answer this question at this point, but I noticed that key outputs, visitor numbers to council-funded or part-funded museums are being sort of tidied up to deal with the issues of collection tours being counted. And I just wondered whether or not we're also careful, because we are tidying up the figures, whether we're careful about tidying up whether or not when you go to the cafe in Gracefield, that's counted as a visit to the collection, or whether it's counted as a visit to the cafe. So it is a detail, but if we're tidying up one, we ought to cleanse our data.
Thank you. Noted. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, Chair, just with regards to 2.5, just following on from our Councillor Smith's request, we are in a situation now where the administration have agreed to hand over to officers responsibility for closing community facilities in this financial year. I just wondered, it's quoting 13 facilities over the 2-year period, with others transferring to full cost leased with community groups. What, if any, information will any council of this any committee of this council get with regards to progress on this? And for example, does the deputy leader know how many of those facilities this year are to be closed? Where are they? Because as members we only get the ward information, It also says as well that the closure of these facilities will be mitigated by making better use of other council facilities, predominantly schools. Well, I was at the Education Committee last week, and there's a woeful £86,000 being generated by income for lets across the whole of the school estate. So really, I can't really see how you can achieve that in the short term until we get our act together with regards to marketing the facilities, community facilities within our schools more effectively. But for the benefit of members, we need to actually see the progress with regards to the £200,000 saving this year, and how will that be reported back, and where will it be reported back to?
Certainly, insofar as the administration is concerned, we recognise it's an evolving issue as we progress through the process for the budget, and we will make our appropriate assessments of that situation as and when the time is right. And we would expect other members would do likewise. Mr. Tracy, is there anything you would like to come back with regard to the £200,000?
Chair, my understanding is that the saving, in terms of progress on delivering on savings, is reported back through the revenue budget reporting for each department, so that the next CCS report and revenue budget monitoring would give members an update across all the 6 savings that were agreed for CCS.
Thank you. Councillor McCowtry.
Sorry, some of these KPIs, some of the targets are a wee bit ridiculous, to say the least. I think it's been recognised by the Scrutiny Committee, and that's why some of them are being reviewed. If you go to Appendix 1, percentage of customers reporting satisfactory or above for CCS services, the target's 70%. That is ridiculous. If you were a private business and you were looking to your customers, you'd be aiming to get 100% satisfactory or above comment from your customers, not 70%. That target should be 100%, and you should be aiming for 100%. You're further on, and another one's percentage of member inquiries dealt with through the elected members' inquiry service within the agreed timescales. Again, the target is 80%, you're only achieving 65%. The target there should be 100% as well. It's ridiculous setting these targets that are below 100%. You should always be aiming for perfection. That way you might get somewhere near it. But to have targets as low as 80%, 70%, absolutely ridiculous. There's no need for them. I think that's why some of them should be thrown out or just forgotten about altogether.
Thanks, Chair. Well, the targets that are within this report were the targets that were agreed as part of the business plan, CCS business plan that was agreed by this committee in last August. And the next item on the agenda is the refreshed business plan with an appendix containing updated targets. So that at the end of the day, it is for this committee to agree the targets that CCS works to. So there will be an opportunity to look at those in the next item on the agenda.
Councillor McCowtry.
That's precisely what I'm suggesting. Let's have targets that mean something relevant. I mean, again, you've got the other one on that first page is about I've raised this one in the past, percentage of front-facing staff who've achieved customer service accredited training. Target 6%. Now, on that basis, it takes you 17 years to train up all your frontline staff. Somebody's got frontline staff there dealing with the public who can be totally untrained for that length of time. These targets are absolutely ridiculous and should be looked at in a great more depth than they have been in the past.
Mr. Tracy.
Just on the particular target that Councillor refers to, there is an exception report that deals with that. This is training staff through the customer services professional accredited training is something that the council started on corporately. It's being led corporately by CCS for front-facing staff. So we've been putting batches of staff through what is quite a rigorous training program. It involves quite a commitment from staff to work on their own and at home through distance learning and to be supported and mentored by professional staff in the council. So, as we've said in the exception report, we are looking to accelerate that program. So it certainly won't take the length of time that Councillor McCowtry is suggesting, but we will be speeding that up covering staff as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. No, I'll leave it to next one.
Thank you. Councillor Lever.
Okay, Chair. In Appendix 1, we've got figures for the number of attendances at various facilities. Do we actually have any figure, or have we any way of finding out how many people are actually using these facilities? After all, you could have somebody who goes for an early morning swim 365 days a year, or you could have 365 people using it once a year, which would give a totally different slant on the usage. So do we have, or can we obtain information? And the other query is, unfortunately, the page isn't numbered, CC S048, central members' inquiries dealt with through the EMIS system. That's in the middle of the fourth page into the coloured appendix. What's the difference between that and how well are we supporting elected members' inquiries at the bottom? As far as I can see, it's the same key performance indicator, but it seems to have different values.
Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of Councillor Lever's first question, no, I don't think we're able to identify the number of people. We can certainly, I imagine, do that for Profiles Plus members, but not for sort of regular users. The difference between the two figures, and apologies for this perhaps not being as clear as it might, is that the one halfway down the page is the CCS figure, and the one at the bottom of the page is the overall corporate figure. Because this is a corporate KPI that CCS is responsible for is for us to report on the corporate figure as well, but it doesn't say that at the bottom, so apologies for that.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. Refer to the noise enforcement under Appendix 1, where it says the number of complaints on domestic noise dealt with under Part 4 for the Antisocial Behaviour, etc. Scotland Act. And it states a figure of 427 there. But what it does not say is how many of these 400, what way they were disposed of, and at what time scale they were disposed. Because if we look below, we also see another KPI, or average time between the times of domestic noise and complaints being 2 hours, which is getting worse. But what it doesn't give us is how the 427 were disposed, what time scale those were disposed at in terms, was it a week, a month, going into years, in terms of the disposal and how they were disposed of, and also in terms of the response time, what equipment was used. My understanding is that we have staff trained on noise machinery that is used, but we don't use all the machinery that's at our disposal to measure noise within the complaints that are made, i.e. machinery that is allowed to be left on the properties. That we seem to are reluctant to do that. So it's really, the question is the 427, what the time scale for some of these are, because that seems relatively high in terms of a year, and then the response time of 2 hours to the disposal time.
Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. These are actually SPIs rather than KPIs, but we obviously report on those to you as well. We don't have any KPIs such in addition to those SPIs around noise, domestic noise at the moment. But again, that's something that we can certainly look at in terms of developing through. If not for the report next on the agenda, certainly it's something that can be looked at for the future. In terms of the detail about equipment, I mean that's obviously an operational matter for DG First, it's certainly an inquiry I can pass on to them to get back to you on, Councillor Scobie.
Thank you. Go to the recommendations. 2.1, review the overall summary. Sorry, Councillor McClung.
Yeah, it's just to clarify Councillor Scobie's point. The target is 2 hours. We're actually meeting it their attendance is 0.7 hours, which is just under 45 minutes.
Thank you. Back to the recommendations at 2.1. Review the overall summary of performance for community and customer service set out Appendix 1. 2.2. Scrutinise the exception reporting in Appendix 2 and consider whether the actions proposed are adequate to improve performance and future monitoring of areas which have not met the target, and recognise the areas of good practice, high performance, where the target has been exceeded. And 2.3, agree the proposed amendments to the performance targets for Community and Customer Service Business Plan 2012-15 as detailed in Appendix 3. Thank you. Okay. On to item 6. A refreshed business plan for 2012-15, Community and Customer Services. Mr. Tracy, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members are being asked to approve, through this report, the refreshed sections of the CCS business plan for 2012-15, so which we're effectively in year 2 at the moment. The appendix contains for you the updated sections. Very briefly, in summary, the Where We Are Now section particularly has updates on finance, revenue and capital, and on staffing. The Where We Want to Be section has updated the improvement plan and the section on measuring performance. How we will get there section is particularly focused on engagement and communication, on equalities and on research and intelligence. And then, of course, Annex 1 is the updated annex containing performance indicators and project milestones. So again, Chair, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much. Any members, any questions? Councillor Dykes.
Thank you, Chair. I did say that I wish to raise the question about civic pride funding under this particular document. At 2.3, it mentions about civic pride funding and the £100,000 for community commissioning and the burial ground maintenance management £100,000 scheme. I was under the impression that this would be fed back to area committees once the information had been gathered, and I would like that assurance from this committee. My understanding was that that would be happening once the information had been gathered, and I did note that you mentioned to Councillor Smith that that information was currently being gathered. I just want to have it confirmed that it will come back to area committee.
Thanks very much. The Director is going to check the details on that one and come back to you.
He'll feed back to the committee members?
Sorry, yes. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks, Chair. It's Annex 3, and it's the second, well, it's not the second last, but it's inside the last page, and it refers to the Snappy project, no longer required following council decision to reduce. No, I mean, most of us are waiting for the Snappy review in our own areas. If you take Annan, it never got done, but Lochmaven got done, which had about 2 buildings. Annan has several. Now, I don't know where that leaves us, because the Snappy review was a sort of overarching project, and the way the CCS thing is going, it's ward by ward. So we're losing a bit of control here, and I'm just a bit disappointed that I found out that Snappy is stopped because of a decision we made, which is fair enough, but to find it out in the paper is a bit sad, basically.
Thanks, Chair. I think I'm right in saying that when the Council considered its budget on 7th of February, that templates 16 and 18 were quite clear that if those were agreed, that they would supersede the Snappy project, which was largely dealing with those types of properties. Not exclusively, that's true, but largely dealing with those types of properties. And obviously there were other parts of the council's budget that we're dealing with office accommodation as well.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholl.
Thanks, Chair. I can't find the page number, but anyway, it's in the stonework repairs, Macmillan Hall, Newton Stewart, £65,000 budget allocation. The scaffolding been up round this building for since about April, and I would wonder if the 65,000 would cover the scaffolding. Never speak of the stone repairs. I'm just wondering where we go with that. What's happening with that?
Mr. Tracy.
Again, Chair, I mean, I don't have that information with me, but I can certainly obtain it from Strategic Property Services or DG Design and advise the member and indeed the whole committee if that's preferred.
Be appreciated if you could advise all ward members.
Thank you. Councillor Lever.
Section 4, working with partners, 4.1, working with partners. I know the DAGCAS contract was mentioned previously, and I see it's due to be retendered during 2013-14, commencement on the 1st of April 2014. What's the date for the retendering, and will we get the detailed performance report prior to the retendering process being completed? Because obviously there may be aspects that we need to change in terms of the contract.
Mr. Tracy.
Yes, Chair. I appreciate it's important to get a performance report before the revised commission is considered. So we'll look to achieve that through the reporting, through the committee reporting.
Councillor Lever.
Just to come back for that, you know, what is the date by which we must complete the retendering, and when will we get the report? I'd like to have some actual dates on that.
Thanks, Chair. I don't have that information with me, but certainly the tender, the new contract will be due to commence from the 1st of April. So it's being worked on at the moment. And I would expect that if a report was to come back, if that was required in terms of the changes to the tender, then that would probably be I would expect the November meeting.
Can I come back on
Councillor Lever.
It's not just any changes. What we need to know is have they actually achieved the targets in the first part of the report. So I think it is absolutely vital that that comes back before we go out or we complete the retendering.
Yeah, it's part of the performance. That would be brought back prior to any retendering going forward. Councillor McCautry.
I'll just return to the point I made earlier. I mean, we're being asked to set new targets here, but with these, this additional document has no numbers on the pages, which makes it practically impossible for anybody to go through it in any great detail. I'll just go back to the one I mentioned earlier about people who feel that their opportunity to have their voices heard at area committee meetings. The target was 75%, 91% said we're happy. The new target is 80%, which is below the performance we had. You shouldn't be setting targets below the performance you received in this particular year. That target should be 100%. If you go into a following one, which is percentage of residents who feel safe in their local neighbourhood, and you're aiming for 89% to feel safe through the day and 68% to feel safe at night. Are you saying it's acceptable for 32% of the people of this area not to feel safe in their house at night time? These are ridiculous targets, and I don't know who set them. These targets should be 100%. We should be aiming to make sure that everybody feels 100% safe in their house, day and night. We should not be saying it's acceptable for 32% of the public not to feel safe in their house. That's okay, we don't have to worry. These are ridiculous targets which get laughed at with the public. And either we make them 100% or forget about them altogether.
Councillor Dykes.
Thank you, Chair. It was actually on 4.8 to do with risk management. And I understand that you have identified 5 key strategic risks and that you'll be putting in place measures, effective measures. I think that some risk management is of particular importance as the Council's moving forward, and I think it's important that this is actually fed back to committee, your risk management and your risk register. We have asked at Audit and Risk Committee that we actually see the directors and discuss the risk registers. I think as we move forward it's becoming more and more important, and I would like confirmation that that will be taken on board.
Yes, Thank you. Councillor Carruthers.
Thank you, Chair. Just it's coming back to Councillor McCortry's point, and I think he's correct when he said previously that we should be aspiring for perfection. I think everybody around the table would agree that, but I think everything's got the resource implications to it, what we're looking at here, so it's got to be relative to the resources that we have. And but surely, I mean, my own experience, personal experience with my involvement with the council office as staff, is that they're all constantly striving for perfection. But it's if we had a bag of money just to flog this to death, I think it would be there. But pick up on the point, we should always be striving for perfection. That should be embedded within the culture of the council. But I think sometimes there's a realisation you're restricted by resources. But I think it's a pertinent point that he does bring up.
Thank you, Councillor Dick.
Thanks. Can I just ask for clarification on the page? No, it's not got a page number. 2.4. Yeah. The FTE totals is 666, as Mr. Tracy pointed out before in the earlier slides, and the number of positions 938, which is consistent with the ABB book. But the established positions the age profile of CCS staff is 739. Could you just reconcile that for me, please? Does that mean we've 938 positions but only 739 staff?
Thank you. Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. I believe I'm right in saying that the breakdown of the figures, which all from then on, which all total 739 of those staff, that information is available at the moment on the council's iTrent system, and we'll be working towards ensuring that we have all that information. But it's something I would need to double check on to exactly understand the discrepancy between the two, and come back and advise you on. But I don't know if I don't have any officer here today to provide a bit more information on that.
Councillor Dick.
Sorry, Chair, I'm a wee bit lost at that. So iTrent has only got 739 people on its database. Is that what we're saying?
Chair, what I'm saying is that in terms of the information, in terms of age, we have information on 739 staff at the moment, and we'll be ensuring that over the next year that iTrent's fully populated with all that information, but that's the information that we have at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Just looking for a little bit of advice. It might not actually be within this plan, and it may not actually sit within that, but I can remember just 2 to 3 years ago at this committee we actually developed a policy on play parks and play park equipment, which was submitted through Policy and Resources. The reason why I'm raising it here is because I noticed that there is, with regards to Dock Park, the development of that after the successful grant. But Dumfries and Dock Park was one of 4 flagship areas for a flagship play park. So I'm just wondering, should the policy be in here over the next 3 years? It should be developed through CCS, or if not, where is it?
Chair, I believe the policy sits with DG First. I think I'm right in saying,
happy to confirm that, Chairman. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor McCortry.
I think it's becoming increasingly obvious as we go round the table on this particular item. Members might be minded to change some of these recommendations in there, but it's very difficult. Point was made right at the start of the meeting by Councillor Lever that these pages are not numbered. And I think Councillor Dick's referred to certain issues, I've referred to certain issues. It's very difficult to carry out a reasoned and structured debate when members cannot refer other members to the page in question. And I would suggest this matter be continued and copies issued to members with page numbers on them so as we can make a reasoned decision at a future date. But be nice to, I'm not saying it's deliberate, but it looks very like it. Oh good, we'll send out a big bunch of documents, 100 pages long, not numbered, so his members are struggling to get a handle on it. And I think really this matter should be continued, and also item 10, the refreshed business plan for Chief Executive, because it's exactly the same, a major report there with no page numbers, which makes it very difficult for members to cross-reference. And if there are things we want to change, it's virtually impossible because other members cannot find the page. So I would suggest these two matters be continued to a future meeting and members issued with proper reports with page numbers on them, and that way we can make a decision that would be transparent to the public, because I don't think we're going to make valued decisions here today on the way we're carrying on.
Thank you. Mr. Crine.
Thank you, Chairman. Clearly for members to determine whether or not they're in a position to fulfil the proposal by Councillor McCotry, but just to be clear, as members appreciate, we put out the full council on the policy and resources papers a week past Monday with very difficult challenges to be met. Staff worked all weekend that weekend to get these papers out, and quite clearly a mammoth effort. Apologies, quite clearly what's happened in terms of the policy and resources papers. To ensure members had the majority of papers as per your set of papers, we had two items to follow. These are the two items that Councillor McCotry refers to. Unfortunately, clearly there's been a mistake made and there are no page numbers, and certainly a mistake has been made. Apologies for that. I'll leave it to members to determine whether or not they wish to continue both of these items to a future meeting.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Chair. I understand my colleague's frustration, and I'm finding it very difficult to actually go through it without numbers as well, and to give full recognition of what other councillors are saying. I think it might be helpful if we're going through these, if people refer to the paragraph, it might be helpful, 2.4, and when it comes to an Annex 1, maybe second page or third page in, something like that would have been more helpful. But, if we can, if when people are speaking to this, if they actually try and go through that and just say 2.4, 2.5 or something like that at the moment.
Thanks very much, Councillor Nicholson. It is difficult and it was acknowledged at the outset, and hopefully it won't be repeated, but the consensus seems to be at this time at least to plod on. Thanks very much. Councillor Dick.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Chair. I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to defer it. It certainly has highlighted the deficiency in the iTrent system, apart from page numbers. But perfectly happy to deal with the report that's in front of us.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Departmental Objective 5 in Annex 1, which is going back to Councillor McCotry's point about about the targets with respect to people feeling safe. Now, we can adjust that target however we want to, but I think rather more critical is what we do with the information which is suggesting that 32% don't feel safe. So can I actually ask on members' behalf, how would we be dealing with that level of information? Where would it come, and what would we expect to see? Because that's the result, really. If we are targeting only 68% to feel safe, then the assumption is that 32 don't. So what do we do with that information? That's point one. And point two, Chairman, is the Play Parks Commission. Actually, the Play Parks Commission should not lie with DG first. I've always said that. It should lie here. It's up to us to deal with it through Community and Customer Services, I would suggest.
Thank you. Mr. Crine, can I just ask for clarification on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The member's quite right. In response to the question, the point was it's not for the Director of Community and Customer Services to take the matter forward. It is for the DG First officers to progress, but ultimately it is a matter for the Policy and Resources Committee, just for clarity. It's progressed by the DG First officers. To save any more blushes, can I advise you, Chairman, I'm just making arrangements for item 10 to be reissued to members with page numbers to ensure that there's full consideration of that, and therefore that might require, Chairman, to take that a little later on the agenda, but given the comments, that should hopefully resolve the problem. Thank you.
Grateful, Mr Crichton. Thanks very much. Please, Mr Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. In relation to Councillor Maitland's first point, my expectation is that this would be part of a wider survey, so getting behind the reasons as to why people feel unsafe would obviously be an important part. All you're seeing here is the high-level KPI figure, and that would be reported back both through this committee that has strategic responsibility and also through the Community Safety Partnership to determine the implications of the information that's been gathered and how that might change the strategic direction of those services.
Councillor Maitland?
Yes. Is it built into our processes, really, is what I'm suggesting? Would we see that on a rolling basis? I mean, we will certainly, the Community Safety Partnership, forgive me, I've forgotten how it reports back to us here, if it does, if it in fact, so I could do with some help there. I know it goes to the Strategic Partnership, but you know, what is the systematic response to dealing with something like this?
Sorry, I was away dealing with your item 10, so for Maitland's... just simply put, Councillor Maitland.
Very simply put, it is, first question I was really thinking aloud, which was, where does the Community Safety Partnership report to, and the information we get through that? And the second part, well, I think the Chief is approaching, but in essence, have we got methods to deal with something like this, which is suggesting, you know, given the raw data we've got here, that 32% don't feel safe. So what are we doing? How do we deal with that in a systematic basis?
Thank you. Chief Executive.
Very good question. Previously, we had, and the management delegated that to be reported under the Police and Fire Committee, with the police leading on that because they were part of the council at that time. Moving forward, we are looking to change the membership of the Community Safety Partnership, which is going to be led by a director, which will then report back to the council more directly as the future arrangements for reporting for the police, because obviously we now have a local commander and we do no longer have our chief constable. We have no direct ability to influence the shape of that. So we'll be looking to replace the former police lead on that element. It will still form a crucial part of the police performance indicators that will report on the local policing plan, but we need to strengthen the governance arrangements, and it'll be part of the consideration of how we report on police, fire and community safety matters coming over the past. But the appropriate level of scrutiny in the past has always been with the police lead, who have then led the Community Safety Partnership. But obviously now the local commander doesn't have the capacity or resources to do that. We're replacing that with the director and now reporting directly back into whatever structures members decide on the future of police, fire and community safety, which will be coming after the recess.
Thank you. Can I just go back to Mr Crichton, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The position is that there will be ongoing progress reports to the Police and Fire Subcommittee that we have established. There's now dates in the diary for the rest of the calendar year for that subcommittee, and therefore, as long as these arrangements continue to be in place, there will be ample opportunity for member scrutiny in relation to particularly community safety issues with reference to the Community Safety Partnership.
Thank you. Councillor Carruthers.
Just to pick up on the point that's been covered, I think, by the Chief Executive, that safety is primarily the concern of the Police Authority. We are no longer the Police Authority, and he's covered how that will be reported back. And I think, I don't know if we need to adjust that sentence or no, but we'll maybe not got the information in front of us. But that was what I was trying to pick up on earlier as well, that we're no longer a Police Authority, so therefore that responsibility has moved primarily to Police Scotland.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, I'm looking at 4.3 on the second page, Chair. We will coordinate the operations of EMS, improving its operation and ensuring that performance reports are produced with the allowed officers across the council to improve. That's the first point. And then the second paragraph there says we will apply the national standards of community engagement in all our communication engagement activity with stakeholders, making appropriate use of voice. Then I look at the annex, and I think it's about page 14 in, but I'm not quite sure, because they're double-sided. But however, it refers to percentage of people. CCS effectiveness in dealing with members' inquiries, and for the department in particular, we're running at 72.9 performance of 12-13, and similar percentage of members across the piece across the council, lower at 65.6 in dealing with members' inquiries. And the target for 14-15 is 90%, which means, out of the 10, one will not receive within the set time as the target date. I just look at that and wonder, why this is not a target of 100%, and why it's running so low in terms of 12 and 13, and this is improving to come anywhere near to 90%, and that's in 14-15.
Thank you, Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. We just moved into the second year of the elected member inquiry service. The first year we started part way through, and certainly the operation of the service took a while to settle down, and I think that's reflected in the performance figures. It was always the intention, I think this was reported right at the start, to work towards as close as possible to 100% achievement, but that we would work towards that over a period of time, and therefore within that kind of framework increase the target to 90% for the current year. I understand that now obviously the system has settled down, it's working relatively smoothly, and performance has been very strong in the first 3 months of this year. So I think it's fair to say that performance is improving, and I take Councillor Scobie's point. We'd be looking to continue to improve that, to raise the target year on year and get as close as we can to 100%. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, my next point is on the second paragraph that I referred to in 4.3. We will apply the national standards of community engagement. I presume that's in consultation as well. And then I look at the annex on the next page, percentage of people who felt that they had the opportunity to have their voices heard at area committee meetings. Just how is this proposed this is going to happen, where members of the public or customers are not allowed to speak at certain parts of the area committee meetings?
Thank you, Mr. Tracy.
Thanks, Chair. The KPI in relation to area committee meetings refers to community meetings, and indeed everybody who attends a community meeting is surveyed at the end of the meeting and asked for feedback on that meeting.
Okay, thank you. Can we go to the recommendation? Members are asked to approve the refreshed sections of the business plan for community and customer services set out in the appendix, and of course we have a number of notes that have come forward as a result of the debate. Members happy to approve?
Try and clarify these notes, Chairman. Bear with me. Firstly, I believe the member reporting arrangements of civic pride monies, just the actual arrangements for that will be advised to members. The ward members will be advised of the refurbishment work at Macmillan Hall, their performance report in relation to DAGCAS. There will be a report back to this committee on the Department Risk Register, and will clarify the position on the community safety arrangements at a corporate level, and finally we pick up the issues in relation to the staffing profile.
Thank you very much. Councillor Marshall.
I think we probably need confirmation that the play park policy sits within DG First business plan.
Take that point on board. Thank you, Councillor Marshall.
Thank you. Moving on now to item 7 on the agenda, financial inclusion strategy. And can I ask Andy Reid to speak to this paper, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just do a quick overview of how we got to where we are and then offer opportunity for questions. The strategy was developed through a working group involving internal and external partners through various meetings back from October last year. The process went through a SWOT and PEST analysis looking at the current situation of financial inclusion and financial exclusion within the region. We then progressed through to developing the vision, themes and the objective outcomes which are within the strategy, which were refined through the working groups and that process. The draft strategy was then circulated for consultation with our partners involved in the process, as well as consultation with the Ad Hoc Welfare Reform Subcommittee. There have been amendments to the previous draft document, which is now presented, including the final strategy in front of you. These were the inclusion of comparison statistics against our comparator authorities and how we sit within Scotland on the issues. There has also been the inclusion of performance indicators against the themes. Now these are the provisional performance indicators. The working group will establish further indicators to sort of look at the lower level impact rather than just at the top end, to look at more indicators that may sit below. Also included has been the reporting mechanism back to Policy and Resources Committee on a 6-monthly basis. And we would bring back both the national comparators on an annual basis from the annual statistics and the performance indicators progress. Also attached with the strategy is an action plan, which is a live document, which is the document that partners through the Financial Inclusion Working Group, which will be established, will work towards and each deliver areas. I'm happy to answer any questions with regards to the strategy document.
Thanks very much. Members, any questions? Councillor Ogilvie.
It's just a bit of clarification. On the universal credit, I know because I sit on the welfare subgroup, welfare reform subgroup, but at the bottom of page 100, it's got a page number, Derek, it says there that the pilot finishes in September. We knew that. Is it still a March date next year for the universal credit to come into Dumfries and Galloway? Because there is a question mark about that because nobody really knew.
We haven't had a date confirmed yet. It was initially we had a provisional date of March next year, but that has been withdrawn and there's been no actual confirmation of when the rollout date is. But unofficially, what we're expecting is February, March next year, but that hasn't been confirmed.
Councillor Smith.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, we discussed this obviously in a bit of detail at the Welfare Reform Subcommittee, and I think certainly a lot of the amendments that I put forward have been incorporated, and I'm grateful for that. I think what does strike me though is obviously there's quite a piece of work still to be done in relation to the performance measures, and obviously it's given base figures as a starting point, and then obviously setting targets for those, realistic targets for those. But I appreciate this is a work in progress, but it would be good to get that reported back as soon as possible. The work that's been indicated is going to take place, because it's obviously very difficult to monitor what progress is being made unless we actually have very much concrete performance measures. And I noticed in one of the, and I think it was actually me that probably raised the figure at the time, was in relation to average weekly income in Dumfries and Galloway. Just for information, I noticed for some strange reason this week that the no-miss figures actually changed. I don't know the basis for the change. It still covers 2012, but it does indicate that Dumfries and Galloway has gone up to £419 per week as opposed to 400, but every other region has also increased, so presumably some statistician in ONS has come up with different figures, but it still accounts for the same area, so it might be worth just looking at that again in terms of updating the figures, but the actual trend is still absolutely there. that we've had a fall in average weekly income 3 years running, and we are the lowest income in the whole of Scotland is it within Dumfries and Galloway. And I just wonder whether or not it's part of the strategy. I know it's difficult, is that we actually include something about dealing with that issue within the strategy itself. I notice in the single outcome agreement in Dundee, they're actually very clear. They set themselves a target of increasing the annual income of Dundonians each year. They've actually got a target there, and they monitor that. And I know it's difficult because you start to develop things that are largely out with our own power. But I just wonder where the thought has gone in from the various partners. We obviously don't sit in the strategic partnership, but I wonder if the various partners have looked at whether or not the issue around income can be incorporated there, because that is a massive issue for this region, that we are a low-paid economy and it's getting worse. We're losing high-paid manufacturing jobs all the time. They're being replaced either by no jobs or by low-paid jobs, and it's a problem that I think is going to get worse. And if we're going to tackle have a financial inclusion strategy, then looking at how we try and deal with low pay is a big issue for this region.
Certainly the low-wage economy that we've come to recognise and be very uncomfortable with has been something that's been spoken about, to my knowledge, on numerous occasions, and it's a target from this administration's point of view to redress the balance on that one, but to have it spelt out in some clear fashion, I can see no difficulty with that. Mr. Tracy.
Chair, it's a helpful suggestion, and we can certainly look at talk to Dundee Council and look at what they're doing and how they're doing it, and see whether there's some good practice that we can learn from there that will assist in terms of another indicator to support this strategy.
Thank you. Councillor Carruthers.
Chair, excellent report, and it came in front of the Welfare Reform Subcommittee. See, in regards to the report, and that was touched on, I think, as well, at that, how will it be reported back? How will the Council see the action plan? I'm thinking in particular, how will we see how it progresses and monitoring of this? It's not absolutely clear.
So, Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Councillor. The action plan will be sort of at the very first financial inclusion working group, which would commence as soon as after approval of the strategy, would allocate out the responsibilities to those actions within it, and then there would be sort of a checklist and a completion dates and specific dates allocated. At the moment, obviously, the strategy and the action plan highlights short, medium, and long term. We'd like to get more fixed dates and allocation of individuals or services to take that forward. So we would come back with an action plan showing completed or comments relating to those areas. Yes to this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at this as a financial inclusion strategy, and we do talk in terms of who is affected by financial inclusion and exclusion. And one of them, single people living alone, young people between the age of 18 and 24. I'm really looking at the effectiveness of this financial inclusion strategy. And looking at my own experience in terms of dealing with young people and indeed the effect this has on young people who are unemployed, in receipt of benefit, have all sorts of payments to make, live a chaotic life, and find they are in homeless accommodation, having to meet service charges, have received their eligibility in terms of 3 grants, and then find, can I get another grant, but still I cannot make ends meet. And what happens is they then face exclusion, or rather termination of their homeless accommodation. In terms of financial inclusion, could there be any way of dealing with this rather than seeing young people on the street, not making ends meet in terms of financial strategy and how we deal with those given circumstances? Also, in terms of the effect or the housing, the not meeting the criteria in terms of number of bedrooms and so forth, and we've got a chart here that indeed there are areas worse off, and the west of the region, DG9, seems to be the worst affected. So there is a drop, a serious drop of income there, and it's been reported in terms of the universal credit that this will see a loss of some £15 million to the region. But in terms of the housing benefit, on average it's about £161 per household claiming housing benefit affected. What has been the development in terms of credit unions, and do they have the capacity to develop into being of assistance? I refer particularly to the Stranraer Credit Union and equally to the others, so that they are of benefit to the people who are facing the effect of housing benefit. And my last question, I don't know, in terms of, again, exclusion, how close are we to, with the RSLs, to saying that there will be no evictions caused by housing benefit effect under the bedroom tax?
Lorna, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Scobie. With regard to the homeless, the young people affected, we are working very closely with homeless people, especially from our own service point of view, when the receipt of housing benefit and application into Scottish Welfare Fund, at looking at the causes and impacts of benefits. We are working together to actually look at what preventative measures can be put in, whether it's in the case of budgeting advice or budgeting support or routes into employability. So that work is ongoing and will continue to be developed. With regard to the impact in the DG9 area in Stranraer and work with credit unions, at the last ad hoc Welfare Reform Subcommittee, we have agreed that we need to develop credit unions. There is a recognition that the current capacity within the both credit unions within the area wouldn't be sufficient to expand sufficiently to meet the projected needs. And we have agreed actually to look at a development officer within the region to actually create awareness of credit unions, but also work with the credit unions and give them some support in actually increasing their capacity to take on extra clients with them, and that is both with the Stranraer Credit Union and Solway Credit Union, which is based in Dumfries. And lastly, the point about the RSLs and the no eviction. Again, at the last ad hoc Welfare Reform Committee, it was reported back through strategic housing that we've had discussions with RSL, but at this point in time they have not said that there will be no evictions because of directly for size criteria.
Thank you. Mr. Tracy.
Just to add on the last point on RSLs, that DGHP and Lawburn Housing Association have been invited by the subcommittee to attend the next meeting, and that they've agreed to do that to make a presentation and obviously to answer the subcommittee's questions. So that's the meeting at the beginning of September.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, and grateful for Lorna's response there. Is there a timescale in terms of the development of the credit unions to be in the position to take on, or at least have the capacity to do the work that's required within the communities?
Lorna?
Yes, the creation of the development worker is done in partnership with DGHP and Lawburn. It's a joint venture with Council and those two organisations. We are actually in the process now of actually creating a job description and employing a development worker, which we expect to be in place by mid-late August. The timescales we're looking at, so it's imminent going forward.
Thank you. Councillor McComb.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to draw members' attention to page 106 and the postcode variation in the impact of the changes to housing benefit. There are areas such as DG8, Newton Stewart postcode, where over £80,000 of spending power is removed from the local economy. Now, in addition to the impact that has on the individuals directly affected, it affects businesses as well. There are multiplier effects here which are very considerable. That it has an extremely detrimental effect on the entire economy. It's not simply the people who are losing housing benefit. It's the people that they would be spending the money with as well. On the same page, you have a very, very low percentage of population with home access to the internet. There is a whole range of people in their 60s, 70s, 80s and older who do not operate through the internet. They don't know how to operate through the internet and they have no home connection. How are these people going to engage with universal credit? Because as I understand it, the entire system is dependent upon internet communication.
Thank you. Mr. Reid.
Just to pick up on the bedroom tax and obviously the loss of income to the individual and the secondary impacts within the towns. Part of the financial inclusion working group will be those organisations within the council that have the sort of the business element. So there would be a representative from economic regeneration to have a look at those areas specifically, that if we lose that money from that local economy, how will that impact, and additional support, and obviously working back with the working and trying to get people back into employment. There's obviously the element of the income maximisation aspect and financial education on ensuring how people utilise the money that they do have or trying to gain further money through benefits. I'll enable Lorna just to give a response on the internet access.
Thanks, Andy. With regard to universal credit is a working age benefit. So people in receipt of pension credit or pension age are not affected by universal credit. Obviously, for people in their 60s, depending on what stage they reach state pension age or application into pension credit, while the government has said it is digital by default, and that actually was where the push will be, that's the access into the system, there will be other routes available to people who don't have home access to internet. And that part of the work we're doing in the pilots with DWP at the moment is looking what the barriers to claiming benefit is and where we need to have public access points and what support mechanisms will need to be provided in an area, be it the local authority or by third sector organisations, to assist people that either can't use the internet or actually do need assistance for other reasons.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thank you, Chair. There's 2 points. One was about the internet access. When we met with David Mundell and the civil servant or DWP chap, they sort of indicated that it might not be a default position. It's still early days, so it might not be that crucial. But however, we've got to address internet access because a lot of folk have to apply by that. The question I was going to ask, we give evidence to David Mundell MP and Christine Fabiani, MSP, who took away. Sorry, Linda. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Chair. Oh, you remember? You were there, weren't you, Chair? So that we still this new benefit system has impact on the council, and we give evidence to both parliaments, if you like. Any feedback on how that's been received, or if it's been compiled yet?
Thank you, Lorna.
We've had no official feedback from that yet. I believe David Mundell was speaking to every Scottish local authority and was feeding that back as a whole to Lord Freud directly. We haven't received any official confirmation. And again, I think Linda Fabiani was collating her various visits to the other Scottish pilot areas and was feeding that back to the Scottish Government. But I got a feeling that just the timing of her visit, it was probably going to be after the summer recess before she actually submitted that report to them and before we got any actual feedback.
Councillor Carruthers.
Same point. I mean, I think all leaders of all 32 local authorities across Scotland have received a letter from Lord Freud and David Mundell. I've seen it, but I've just tried to find it now. But here's an update on it. I'll pass it on if I find it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you. It was just to pick up on the broadband point and get clarification as to whether the sort of lesser percentage is due to household financial issues or if it's because there's insufficient rural broadband. So, you know, do we have evidence as to why that figure is so low? And I'd just like to say that I think it's entirely inappropriate for officers to be using politically loaded terminology. It's a spare room subsidy.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Thank you. I just was looking at the action plan, and I understand now that the responsibilities will be picked up and put in the near future, because not being able to see who is responsible down here makes it rather more difficult for us to pick up whether or not there is an absolute cross-cutting approach to this. I look, for argument's sake, for mention specifically of other people and with respect to health, and you know, they aren't here specifically mentioned. The thing that we're going to do apparently is to deliver and develop on page 127, Chairman. At the bottom, we're going to deliver and develop a training seminar for practitioners working out with the financial advice and support system. But that's got a long-term tag against it. It means it could happen in a year's time. And as far as I'm concerned, you know, that's arguably not the right scale of time to be saying to everybody else, look, you're involved with this just as much as we are. If the psychological change is 6%, which are the figures given here, for somebody who is in control of their finances as opposed to somebody who's not in control of their finances, that's something which needs to be dealt with absolutely immediately. And I would simply suggest that through the strategic partnership, perhaps, because that's the other place that this is going to go, we should be flagging this up more quickly and more urgently. That's one thing. The second thing is I noticed that the use of income and pay is used interchangeably. No, it's not interchangeable. Can we have absolute clarity on whether this is income or whether it's pay? Because they're not the same. And the other issue is that Highland, which if we look at our own papers, Highland region is considerably more like us in respect of the data zones and the changes that have happened, but isn't in here as a comparator, whereas you know in the rest of our papers today it has been in there, so it might be useful to have that. The other issue is about, I think we should be looking for best practice in the across the UK, not merely in schools. In Scotland, we're being asked to look at Scottish best practice. I would suggest we don't confine ourselves to financial advice, educational materials being simply in Scottish ones. I'm sure that there are other top quality ones, just as there is in the money advice service, you know, good levels of information which are across the whole UK. So sorry to produce all those bits of information, but I think that's important.
Thank you. Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Councillor. With regards to the responsibilities, as sort of mentioned earlier, the aim will be to establish a financial inclusion working group on the back of this meeting today, make those allocations of responsibilities, and I'm happy to circulate, once we've got those responsible people within it, happy to circulate that round to members so that you're aware of which partners are picking up which aspects or which areas are leading on those areas. That doesn't mean that the others won't be doing anything. It's obviously that we need to have lead people on these so we're not duplicating our work. With respect to the specific one on the practitioners training, we can elevate this when I'll speak to the NHS with regards to that's an action that they've highlighted and put within the plan, so be more than likely one that they would take forward, and we can see if they're happier to go with an earlier one, and I think that's a correct point to make. With regards to the comparator regions, this was, I've taken these ones from some Scottish papers, but happy to include Highland council as a comparator one and get that information, and point taken also with regards to the whole of the UK. We shouldn't be specific. And I will make amendments to the income and pay reference so that it will be income throughout.
Thanks very much. And an early seminar was something certainly that we had in mind, following not least on the back of the original seminar that took place at Easterbrook. But timing is everything, as they say. And I think part of the considerations that were in there were what was the impact liable to be in terms of the measures that were being rolled out. So it's getting that timing right and being able to impart as much useful information as possible. But that would be helpful. Okay. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, it's just on the communication. I don't know what page number it is here. Communication will take place between the parts and residents of Dumfries and Galloway. I have asked the question in terms of communication and people's right of appeal to decisions made in terms of the housing benefit, where, you know, there are reasons given as to why their housing benefit has been affected, and also explicitly that they have a right of appeal. I have since had received a copy of a communication in terms of an individual's right of appeal, and again it is not explicit that the person has the right of appeal. What it does say, and I recognise that there are cases currently under judicial review in terms of them being challenged, but it doesn't take away, because that case or cases are being pursued through judicial review, it does not take away the individual's right to appeal after review of that decision to tribunal at local level. But that is not coming through in the communication. So for the council, in terms of financial strategy and communication, I think we need to make it explicit, because the percentage take-up of appeals, as I understand it, is very low in Dumfries and Galloway in terms of people appealing against that decision and going to tribunal to have that decided by a judge in that forum. Chair, I think we need to be explicit in the communication. I don't think that's been the case so far.
Thank you. Lorna?
All benefit decision notices have the right of appeal stated on them. It's a statutory standard document. So any decision notice that goes out, regardless of whether it relates to size criteria or any other benefit decision, has the right of appeal comments on it. If we receive an appeal, again, about size criteria, we take that appeal and we send it to the appeals tribunal. We wouldn't stop an appeal in any way. It's up to the appeals service to make a decision on whether it's, you know, within jurisdiction or not. So we have a standard procedure that we follow, and that's standard in all documents.
Thank you. Councillor Lever.
I'm sorry. The change to the housing benefit will result in a reduction in income of nearly £900,000. That's income to the social landlords, effectively. To some extent, that will be mitigated by the direct housing payments. Or is that net of the direct housing payments? And what effect will that have on the income of the RSLs? Presumably they'll have to meet the shortfall by increasing the rents to their other tenants. Have they given any indication what that will have, effect that will have on the rental to the other tenants as well? Because obviously it's going to spread outside of people in the receipt of housing benefit.
Thank you. I know the RSL's DGHP, not least, had very early on expressed their concerns about the landscape and the indebtedness that they were liable to face in the circumstances. But can I ask Lorna to speak to this, please?
Thank you, Chair. The figure there is quoted is a gross figure. That's a housing benefit reduction. It doesn't include any, and I'm assuming you mean discretionary housing payments. It doesn't include any payment we would make on top of that discretionary housing payment. But we can separate that out, and as we're going on, we can report through the year what the reduction is and how much in DHP we've paid to social landlords. That housing associations haven't explicitly said how they are reporting to us that they are seeing a rise in rent arrears, specifically for size criteria tenants impacted. And that rise is about think 50 to 60% was the last figures they quoted that increase is. How they are going to cope with that increase hasn't been made explicit to us. Legislatively, for housing benefit administration, should a housing association disproportionately increase their rents for people who are non-housing benefit, does have implications. I couldn't say for sure what their legal responsibilities are regarding rent settings, but I know certainly for a housing benefit angle, if there's a disproportionate rent increase because of people on or off benefits, there is subsidy and payment implications for them. So while I can't categorically say they won't go down that road, I would doubt it.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Yeah, just in relation, we're talking about rent arrears here, but obviously as well the council collects the council tax as well. And I just asked my colleagues there, and I just really wondered, was there going to be any different approach to that? Because at the moment we kind of take quite a hard line and pass the debt to Stirling. So just in the current climate, is there anything going to be done with regards to that, or do we still have the kind of hard line approach?
I'm sorry, I'm not 100% clear on the question, Councillor Marshall. Can you repeat it?
Yeah, it's just with regards to our current policy on collecting council tax. Due to the current situation, is that going to change, or was there anything looked upon that maybe affect the budgets, etc., with regards to that?
Thank you. Thanks very much. Lorna?
No, is the short answer. We haven't changed the debt collection procedure for anybody who's also impacted by size criteria as well. We did some initial analysis of people that are impacted by size criteria and looked at how many already had council tax arrears, and over 60% already had debt problems with us before the impact of housing benefit. We're keeping a very close eye on council tax collection rates and those people affected. At the moment, we're not seeing any great change in the level of recovery over the first 3 recovery runs we've done this year, but we're keeping an eye on it. It's something that'll be, as we go, we'll have a look and see what impact it's having and deal with individuals on an individual basis.
Thanks very much. Councillor Carruthers.
Chair, I found the update. I can either read out the 2 salient paragraphs or pass it on to Lorna. She can disseminate whichever you wish.
Okay, thanks very much. We'll go to the recommendations. Members are asked to approve the Financial Inclusion Strategy, Appendix 1. Councillor Maitland.
It's a tiny point, and I didn't raise it, and I'm sorry, I should have earlier on, but I wonder if somebody could just run a plain English thumbnail over it, please. There are odd little quirky things which ought not to go out as they are.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Chair, the recommendation's fine. I just wanted to say that as I sit on I've been at the seminar and I sit on the subgroup, that I would like to thank the officers for the sterling work today. I know it's a moving feast, and this is probably a living document that we'll have to revisit as time goes on. So I just wanted, on behalf of me and Colin from the Labour Group, to say thank you for the work so far, because it's a sterling job at difficult times.
Yeah, I'm happy to support that also, and grateful to the officers, and would be even more grateful with plain English. Thanks very much indeed. Okay, moving on to item 8 now, the Chief Executive Service Budget 2013-14. Is it Alec?
Yes.
Can I ask Mr. Haswell to speak to this, or if he has anything to add?
Good afternoon, members. Chairman, you might or might not be pleased to hear I'm not doing a PowerPoint. The report has got attached to it the ABB for the Chief Executive Services, Appendix 2 on the report. You'll notice that the service has a net controllable budget of 19.4 million. That controllable budget is set out over 8 different functional units. The ninth function being the democratic core, which is not a functional unit. Throughout the ABB, each of the functional business units explains how they use their resource, what their budget is, and the service that they delivered. This is also reflected in the business plan, which is later on in the agenda, item 10. Net expenditure details for the department show that 75% of expenditure is on staff costs. We do have an income of about £2.1 million. That mainly comes from licensing and leasing commercial units. Staff resource, there are 482 people. Within this, we have all the posts for the new modern apprentices. That's for reporting purposes only. They're obviously spread across the council. So there are actually 357 full-time posts over the 8 functional units. That represents just short of 5% of the council's entire workforce. Detailed information on the profile of the workforce is included in the business plan. Just for information, staff bands, 92% of staff are paid on bands 1 to 12, 5% on 13 to 15, and 3% represent heads of service and chief officers. As you can see, as you go through the ABB, members will see the staff resources are quite easily identified in each of the functional units. Staff carry out a range of duties which involve providing professional services to other parts of the council, supporting decision-making and delivering corporate and democratic core services. The service has also supported other services in achieving savings and will now lead a number of corporate initiatives aimed at securing savings across the council, particularly through effective procurement, control of supplies and services, property rationalisation and corporate control of staff costs. As a management team, we endeavour on every occasion to balance the department's outturn year on year with reducing resources, and in the 12-13 outturn previously reported to this committee, we again delivered a balanced budget. Since financial year 2010-11, Chief Exec Service has achieved savings of £3.4 million, which equates to 15% of the net controllable budget, and that includes £2.6 million in staff costs, £550,000 in the current year. Given the proportion of budget which consists of staff costs, it is inevitable that the search for further savings will require further staff reductions within CES. Chairman, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I have colleagues from the CES management team here to answer those that I can't.
Thanks very much. Members' questions? Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, I'll kick it off, Chair. And reference was made earlier to integration and community facilities within the previous director's budget. And it was advised that indeed the savings in property rationalisation may be the responsibility of yourself, Alec, as under the Chief Executive Services, in terms of savings in Stranraer against integration and rationalisation of buildings. And there was a rationalisation in terms of social work to George Street, in the staff being moved from there into Ashwood or Sun Street rather. Against that, there seems to have been a liability that perhaps was not reported to the members in terms of information, where the liability to the property in George Street has been reported as circa £150,000 plus a year's rent to run for 2013-14 of some £60,000. One is why this was not, or has it been taken into consideration in terms of the savings achieved, and you refer to 550k in 2013-14. Were these taken into consideration, and if so, why were they not reported to members?
Mr Haswell.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, the property at 7074 George Street, Stranraer, was a leased property. The cost to the council of running it per annum was £84,100. It was one of the properties that we determined that we would vacate in terms of the council's fewer but better buildings. The property was in considerable need of work, which the council would have had to do had they continued with the lease. The payment that Councillor Scobie refers to is called, in legal terms, dilapidations. Basically, what happened was when Dumfries and Galloway Regional Council entered into leases, they got the cheapest rent they could possibly get by promising the landlord that they would pay for all dilapidations at the conclusion of the lease. The figures Councillor Scobie has mentioned are not my figures. They must have come from someone else. There is a negotiation ongoing with the landlord regarding the payment of dilapidations. The point I would make is that there is a budget available for paying dilapidations. We have done it in the past, and there are still a number of buildings which the council occupy as leased buildings where that particular clause remains in the lease because the leases were for 15, 20, 25 years. Basically, where we are at the moment is that the landlord has suggested dilapidations. There is a negotiation ongoing. That negotiation will either prove fruitful or become a court case. What we're doing is we're saving the revenue budget. There is a budget available in capital to cover these issues.
Thank you. Councillor Scobie.
Yeah, Chair, my second question was, as I understand, this was not reported to the members by way of information.
It's within the budget, sir. It was reported in the budget. It wasn't specifically reported because members went through in that budget. They agreed to vacate a considerable number of buildings, including Dunby House, Stranraer, Buccleuch Street, Dumfries, Main Street, New Abbey, Market Street, Castle Douglas. These properties are all in the council's ownership, including 39 Lewis Street. There are two, I think, where the dilapidations are involved, and there is a budget line there which enables the council to do it. It comes out of a separate budget. What we were doing was the council agreed that they would reduce the revenue running costs of the buildings that they have agreed to vacate. So it's two separate budgets.
Thank you. Councillor McCautry.
Thank you, Chairman. Refer to page 185, bottom of the page, resources, staffing details, banding. If you go to band 13, full-time equivalent is 6, number of employees is 3. Does that mean we've got 3 employees who are each doing the work of 2 men?
They work half a week each.
No, it should be the other way about. Your banding should have 3 FTEs and 6 employees, not 6 FTEs and 3 employees. Because if you get 6 FTEs and 3 employees, that means they're each doing the work of 2 men.
I'll double check that, Councillor McCautry. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Well, if they're doing the work of 2 people rather than 2 men, it's probably because they're women, Tom, I suspect. That's why they're working so hard, Just in relation to the figures, it's really quite difficult to compare the report this year with the ABB figures last year because, leaving aside the fact it's been put in a different order in the papers today, there seems to be quite a few changes. And I would just like clarification from Alec in the figures he gave for staffing. How does that actually compare with last year? I was just looking at some of the figures for last year. Finance had gone from 89 people last year to 96. Organisational development and human resources had gone from 28 to 30. Planning and performance had increased from 7 to 9. Business management had increased from 63 to 71. I just wonder how the figures you gave, given that most of the savings you're making is in staffing, how do the figures on staffing compare, excluding obviously the apprenticeships, but how do the figures actually compare to last year? It's also difficult actually to compare budgets, because if you look just at the budget headings for organisational development and human resources, I think this year we're talking about a budget of, or projected expenditure of 2.4 million, but last year I think the figure was somewhere in the region of 1.4 million. Now I don't believe that we've suddenly put an extra £1 million into organisational development and human resources, so obviously something's been shifted around somewhere, and it's very difficult to actually clarify what's been. So there must have been a lot of changes within the department. It's very difficult to get my head around some of the actual ballpark figures. It'd be quite helpful just to know what the various changes that have taken place that have resulted in, and I think that's only one. There's several examples within this department.
Thank you. Mr. Garrett.
Yes, the Chief Executive Service has undergone a fair degree of change. There's been a number of refocusing reviews which have resulted in some transfers between services within the department. On page 142, we've tried to summarise some of the major movements. The example you gave there in terms of HR, you're right, we haven't put the extra £1 million into the HR service, but we have included the modern apprentice policy funding in there, so that's explained there at page 142. Appreciate those explanations are very much in summary form, so we could give further details to members if that's something you're looking for. I can only really comment, you made the example in relation to finance. I know that that's due to movement of functions rather as additional staff. Finance has actually reduced its number of staff by 2 since this time last year, but we have brought a couple of staff into the service in relation to staffing, moving to sit alongside the payroll and payment employment services. But again, we could provide an analysis of how the staffing details on the individual sections have moved from this year to, last year to this year.
Can we give an overall figure, Paul Clarkin? Is there an overall figure of the reduction? I know there's been a reduction, but is there an overall figure? From to?
Councillor Smith?
I'm assuming there has probably been an overall reduction across the board, because obviously one of the most significant savings that was agreed was on staffing reduction, so there must have been a reduction somewhere. And just on the general issue of funding, obviously there are no proposed service reviews within this report. Is that on the basis that the 6 savings options that were agreed last year, affect with indicated figures for next year, are as far as the department believes you can go in relation to making savings? Is that the only proposals that at this stage you believe are viable?
We undertook a major refocusing of the Chief Executive Service, and that's the issue that Paul Garrett was alluding to, where we cleared out tiers of senior management from the Chief Executive Service. We have indicative figures going forward in the budget adopted this year, and those are the figures that we will be going on in terms of staff savings. As I've said, we are still using the tools that are available to us in relation to early retirements, restructuring. We have Strategic Property Services with a new manager appointed who will be looking at how Strategic Property Services and architects will operate in the future. I anticipate that there may be some savings to be made in that area, but that will come forward to members. Yeah, the answer to you is basically yes, sir. We intend to take it forward on the basis of the indicative budgets we had. Whether we've reached the end of the road, that will be for the council to determine.
Ms Clarkin, thank you.
We'd actually be happy to provide analysis of the contrast between the figures for last year and next year, or the current year and last year. Any small fluctuations within OD and HR are probably around the resource requirements to administer the MA schemes, so that would explain the small numbers and changes in those figures.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
Chairman, Wigtonshire, Annan, Neskdale and Stewartry members, prick up your ears. Nithsdale members won't be interested. How many people in the Chief Executive Service are employed in those areas?
From memory, in Wigtown, now 2. Because I shed 2 jobs on, I said cheerio to 2 people on Friday night, so I'm now down to two licensing standards officers based in Stranraer.
Right.
In Annandale, Eskdale, there is still 1 employed, but shortly to retire. And in Stewartry, there are no members of the Chief Executive Service employed. The bulk of officers employed within the Chief Executive Service are based around Dumfries.
Thank you.
Councillor Dick. Okay, thank you. We go to recommendations. Receive a presentation on the ABB information and associated budget estimates for the Chief Executive Service from the Service Director. And at 2.2, review and agree the Chief Executive Service budget 2013-14 is detailed at Appendix 2 to this report. Agreed? Thank you.
Chairman, can I say for all members, I will provide you with an analysis of the differences in staff numbers between last financial year and this financial year.
Thank you. If we can go on now to item 9 on the agenda, Director's End of Year Assessment of Business Plan Performance, Chief Executive Service. Again, can I ask Mr Haswell, has he anything to add, please?
Very little to add to the report. Chairman, members will see the plan contains 32 key performance indicators and 22 projects. I would point out some of the performance indicators are corporate and others specific to CES. 15 on track, and there's an exception report at Appendix 2 which deals with those which either are not on track or which are overperforming. We've got 12 projects on target, 9 completed and 1 has not been progressed. I've got colleagues with me who will be happy to answer specific questions on their specific performance indicators, Chairman.
Thanks very much. Members' questions? Councillor Dick.
Thanks, Chair. Just on page 203 there, can you explain that total accommodation square metres where there's an exception report? Does that mean if I understand this correctly, does that mean that we try and accommodate each individual person within 16 square metres? And at the moment, they occupy 18.
Basically, that's correct. You'll see that the actual target is 16. We reduced the target. It's still going down. If you look at the exception report, it's gone down from 19.97 to 18.26. We will be accelerating that as we go through the property review. Moving people about buildings takes a lot longer than you would anticipate, as I know to my cost.
Thank you. Councillor Maitland.
It's me and the property review. I'm completely mystified as to about this review and when it began and when it's going to stop.
The property review began about 18 months ago. We have done a fairly major piece of work with both architects, DG First Design and DG First Engineers and Strategic Property Services. The engineers are now part of DG First itself because there was a synergy between the engineering services, and DG First now employs the engineers. We have recently appointed a senior manager for property and architects, and there are various moves afoot in relation to staff moving from property to architects and vice versa. We will have one service within about 6 months. There have been moves, for example, people involved in estates are now going to be working for the assessor because there's a synergy there. The school's PPP project team is being reduced in size and will report direct to education. We are looking to the new manager to come in, and we will produce, we have already got a management structure. We have to populate that management structure over the next 6 months. I'm happy to give the member a more detailed briefing if that's required.
Chairman, it's simply that it's coded in here as starting on the 1st of October, and its due date is the 31st of December, and its progress is 10%. I think it should have actually appeared with something to indicate there was, that there should be something happening here, and it's not. And so I think members probably would quite like to know what's going on. It's not, if it's only 10%, if it's only 10% complete at this stage, then for heaven's sake there must be some anxiety against it, and there's nothing here to indicate that we should be concerned. But
that's because there is nothing to indicate that you should be concerned, in my view. But I'm happy to share more information. Can I remind members that this was undertaken? What you're looking at now is the implementation of the actual review. The review has been completed 100%. The implementation is now taking place in that we're populating the new structure for the new service. The reason it's 10% is I thought that 10% was a reasonable figure to put in it as against having interviewed and brought forward a senior manager who will start on the 26th of August of this year. I don't want to start populating a structure without a new manager in place, because she will undoubtedly wish to stamp her mark on how the organisation will function in the future. That's the reason I've stopped at 10%.
The veil is torn from my eyes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to go back to Councillor Dick's point about the 18.26 square metres, could that have any relationship due to the fact that you get 52 more workstations than you have employees?
The additional workstations are there for, they're a corporate resource for people who hot desk. There will be more and more hot desking done. We will eventually reduce the number of desks as well, but if people don't have a desk to go to, for example in Stranraer, I like to go and sit in a room with a desk and a computer in front of it. It's not empty all the time, it's probably used by planning, building control, whoever else happens to be in Sun Street that day. So yeah, we have more desks than we do people, but that's for a specific reason.
Thank you. Councillor McClung.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's along the same lines as Councillor Maitland's questions. Page 201, the bottom two KPIs, develop a unified staff suggestion system, progress 5%, date due 31st of December. The next one down, continue the management development programme, 25%, date due the 30th of September. And then in page 205, but halfway down, review key CES business processes, 10%, date due 31st of December. Can you remove the veil from my eyes as well, please?
All I can say is these are projects currently ongoing. Some of them have a long lead-in time where there's some fairly detailed work requires to be done, and you'll see the completion date, I think, on each of them is the 31st of December 2013. We will achieve that completion date. It's just the fact that there's been a long lead-in time into some of them.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall. Councillor Smith.
I'm just looking at page 202 in relation to policy development, coordination, evaluation. Apparently, we've made 100% progress and improvement to the policy development and review framework, as well as improving the budget development programme. I'm just wondering what that improvement to the policy development and review framework actually was.
I'll ask Lorna to address members on that.
Hi, in relation to the policy development framework, that's the existing one that sits within the council that officers use, policy officers across the council use. I'm mindful of the fact there's an additional commitment coming forward in our business plan about removing just that operational approach and moving it up into the business management of the council, and also the ad hoc subcommittee in consideration of that, and that's a piece of work the policy team are looking at just now.
Thank you. Councillor Marshall.
Chair. Page 205 at the bottom, it's with regards to, I think I asked this last year as well, it's with the responses to FOI requests within 20 working days. Got a value of 84% and a target of 90%. I just want to check that, are these all ones where we failed to actually just get the information to that within the required 20 days, working days? Or is it ones where we need an extension and wrote out to, because it maybe needs to be split down because it's...
I take Councillor Marshall's comments entirely. I think the vast bulk of them, there may be the odd one that's missed and not done within the 20 working days when it should be, but the vast bulk of the ones that take longer than 20 working days, we automatically contact the inquirer and say this information, as we're entitled to do at law, this information is taking longer to gather than 20 days, therefore we will get to you, and we always give a deadline at that point. So that is done automatically, but Councillor Marshall's quite correct. We maybe need to look at how we set that down in future, and I'll address that.
Thank you. Councillor Dick.
No, it was covered by Councillor McClung.
Thank you. Councillor Ogilvie.
Thanks, Chair. Mr Haswell, in his introduction to the report, said several times that building standards and others were moving to DG First. And we heard earlier that DG First really shouldn't be setting a business plan because it's a commissioned service. I just wondered what the technicalities are there when you're putting people into a commissioned service. And we said earlier that maybe the business plan should be looked at this committee. So just a bit of clarity on that one.
Maybe if I can clarify, Councillor Ogilvie, what we're doing is we currently, or in the past, had two services because they're effectively already working closely together. One was Strategic Property Services and the other was DG Design, which was architects. Now they all deal with property, whether it's maintaining the property, whether it's keeping records about the property, or whether it's providing new property. Makes sense for them to be amalgamated. They are effectively merging as we speak, because they are working much closely together, and I dread to say this, but members should have noted that there's less slippage on the capital programme, there's less of a blame culture. We now have our capital investment strategy, which seems to be working and will continue to work, so the merger is already taking place. That service will remain at the moment within the Chief Executive Service, and members will have seen a report which the Chief Executive's put to full council on Friday, which tells you where that service is going to be managed. The engineering side was DG Design Engineers, which was a separate trading arm of DG First, the major DG First organisation. What we've done is we've recognised that the engineers work much better if they're working together rather than as two separate units, because we no longer require to have this split, which was an artificial split basically. So they are now working together in DG First. They are commissioned by PHES to undertake the work. So there is an issue in relation to work which is commissioned, and I'm hoping that DG First committee will look at that this afternoon, because DG First can make savings, but they can only make savings based on their own operations. They can't make savings based on, for example, refuse collection, because the budget for refuse collection rests with Planning, Housing and Environment Services. So it would be PHES that would have to say, there's where the savings will come from refuse collection, and DG First would then deliver the service on that lesser amount of money. I know it's a bit convoluted, sir, but I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Scobie.
I'll come to it in a second. Apologies, Chair. Yep, it's on page 205. The percentage of invoices sampled and paid within 30 days, and Paul and I has had a discussion on this one. It's got a status of alert or warning, Chair, and in a short trend of getting worse. We've heard from the previous, on the previous report in terms of CCS, the impact that welfare reform, housing benefit is having. Is there any correlation between this, while we're still hitting the 92% target, but you know there is a warning note against it, and a trend of getting worse in terms of meeting the 30 days. Given the comments that I made earlier in terms of austerity, the £15 million that could be taken out of the economy, and people requiring to have payment from small businesses, is there anything we can draw from this performance indicator here?
Mr. Garrett.
Thanks, Chair. Yep. The reason there's a warning there is because during the integration of the new financial system Integra, there was actually a kind of a blip, a drop in performance for a spell, which meant that we didn't hit the 92% target last year. We've got over that now. We're seeing improvements coming through in the last quarter, and in the next item on the agenda you'll notice that we've actually increased the target for next year from 92% to 93%. So I think we're over that difficulty we had last year. That's why there's a warning sign. We're looking for further improvements going forward.
Thank you.
Chairman,
Councillor Scobie.
My other remark would be percentage of members' inquiries dealt with through the elected members' inquiry. I asked the question of the last director and ask it this one, where there is an alert warning, the value running at 65.59, an 80% target, and an alert status there.
I think with all new systems, the EMES system has had teething problems. That is not a CES indicator, that's a corporate indicator across the council, so that's the council performance across the council. Some services have responded to the MES system, shall we say, better than others. We have a target of 80%. We're heading for that target. We have achieved 65.59%. I think my colleague Mr Tracy intimated that he was making some changes in the inquiries, because that is actually controlled from within CCS, and we have been working closely with them to improve the system. All I'll say is it's a new system. It's taking a bit of bedding down. I think a lot of members were unhappy with it to begin with, which created some difficulties. I think we're moving it forward, and I have every confidence that the longer trend will be an improvement and achieving the annual target. Personally, I would like to see a 95% target there, but it's not there yet, Councillor, and it would be wrong of me to suggest it could be there in the short term.
Okay, thank you. If we can go to the recommendations, members are asked to 2.1. Review the overall summary of performance for Chief Executive Service set out at Appendix 1, and at 2.2, scrutinise the exception reporting at Appendix 2 and consider whether the actions proposed are adequate to improve performance and future monitoring of areas which have not met the target, and recognise the areas of good practice, high performance, where the target has been exceeded. And 2.3, agree the proposed amendments to the performance information for Chief Executive Service 2012 to 15 business plan as detailed at Appendix 3. I was happy to agree those three recommendations. Okay, members, can I ask that we go to item 11 at this point, and then we'll break for lunch. We have item 10 ready with page numbers and the exempt item, which I would propose members would have sight of during the lunch break, and then we can wind up business after lunch. So if we go to item 11, the Local Government Boundary Commission for Scotland, 5th General Reviews of Electoral Arrangements. Can I ask Mr Haswell if he has anything to add?
Nothing to add, Chairman. Turkey's voting for Christmas.
Okay, members, any questions? Councillor McCarthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing we're being asked to do is to say whether we're content or not with the present number of councillors. I think at the last count it was 117,000 voters, and the criteria for this authority is 2,500 voters per councillor. That comes to almost exactly 47 as we've got at the moment. The one thing I don't understand, I can't find it on the Boundary Commission's website, why are they waiting to see the result of the 2011 census? I mean, we've got a running register that's bang up to date. They're going to base it on something which is now 2 years out of date. And the intriguing thing is, if the population is actually higher, the number of recorded votes, you only need another 2,500 and then we'd be due another councillor. Now, if that was the case, are they also empowered to look at the setup of the wards? You know, with so many 3-member wards at the moment, so many 4-member wards, are they then empowered to maybe say, right, we're going to do away with 3 4-member wards and make it 4 3-member wards? Is that within their remit as well? Because I can't find that in the documentation.
I think that's part of the overall review. If you determine that you've got the right number of councillors, I don't see them interfering with the ward boundaries. The one that we looked at was the ward that Councillor McCaughey and his 3 other colleagues are in, whether that could be split. And we did that as officers. We didn't talk to the Boundary Commission about it, but we looked at it. We need to make it a 5-member ward, and the law doesn't allow for 5-member wards. It only allows for 4 and 3. So basically, if you say 47 members is sufficient, I don't see them looking at the boundaries and changing the boundaries, because if you say the population's there, it covers it, and the split is as should be at the moment, assuming you continue with a form of proportional representation.
Yeah, but again, some of the ward boundaries, I think that one of the wards is about 10% over, and another one about 10% under. So would they be duty bound to try and redress that?
The Boundary Commission will look at that. I think there's a threshold. I don't think they worry about 10%. I think there's a threshold nearer 15 to 20. But I'll give Councillor McCaughey that detail in person.
Thank you, Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. Happy with what's been put forward, and I take on Mr Haswell's point. But I did speak to the Boundary Commission back in March and discussed this. There's some wards in Scotland that have 20,000. Again, not per member, but like 4,000 each, 5,000 each, sorry, in 4-member wards. But the geographics, I asked them informally what did they think personally themselves in regards to Dumfries and Galloway, and they felt pretty much the same as what we're reflecting here. But geographically, the numbers stack up for us because we've got a large area to cover. And I think this is just a timely thing as well. It's procedural, isn't it? It's nothing's actually stimulated this in particular other than it's time to have a review, and another 10 years I think will be the same.
Okay, thank you. So members content with the recommendation? Okay, can I ask members to be back at 10 to 2?
Are we going to get these papers first?
Yes, they're here. Okay, thanks very much. 10 to 2.
I'm assuming
for the item 10, refresh business. Alex, hopefully on his way, but refresh business plan for 2012-15, Chief Executive Services. Do any members have any questions? Ronnie?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to thank both of the panel members who accept the report.
Thanks, appreciated, yeah.
Any other questions? Can we go to the recommendation? The members are asked to approve the refreshed sections of the business plan for Chief Executive Services outlined at Appendix 1 and set out fully at Appendix 2. Councillor Maitland?
Right, what I'm wanting to ask, Chairman, to get it into the arena is about the carbon target. And they weren't in the original one, you know, and they weren't in the first performance report, so you'd expect to see them here if they'd been changed, and they're not here either. So I would just like to be sure that we actually get some information about the department's targets, because that's, I think, what they were supposed to be producing. So if I could have some help on that, please.
No, thank you, Chairman. Pleased to confirm certainly the Department's committed to ensuring that we are carbon friendly, and there's a range of measures given our responsibility for strategic property to champion that, and therefore we'll just clarify and circulate to members the specific indicators we're working to in that regard.
Okay, no other questions? Councillor McGregor?
Just a very brief one. What exactly is the implementation of equality duties on page 280?
280.
Sorry, Chairman.
Okay, sorry, Councillor McGregor, could you repeat that question for the sake
Certainly,
of the Director and me?
It says title of project, implementation of equality duties, and I'd just like to understand exactly what equality duties entail.
There are duties imposed on the council by the qualities legislation which require us to ensure that we produce statutory reports. Members will remember, I think at P&R committee around March, April time, there's a whole raft of equalities reports come forward on race, creed, religion, ethnicity, etc., etc., etc. So that's what we're required to do, and that ties up also with the SOA as far as I can recall.
Councillor Dick.
Just on page 284, I'm presuming the capital spending performance for 11-12 at 101.57%. Is that because they've picked up on stuff which was left over from the previous year?
Yeah.
Councillor Maitland.
I'm very sorry. I read this in the first part, and I've now got to try and tell you what the next part is. The section is Measure 2.1, Productivity of our Staff in Objective 2, and it's about leading the Graduate Employment Programme. Well, that's what I don't know, because I read it in the first version. But it's basically about leading the Graduate Employment Programme. We've also got a placement scheme as well, if you remember rightly. We've got from the Crichton campus, University of Western Scotland and Glasgow University, and we've been we put £10,000 into that placement scheme. Now, I would have assumed that that should actually feature, in fact, under the Graduate Employment Programme, because it's led by the same person. My understanding, and I think it's very important.
I don't have a direct answer to that. I'll check that for you and come back to members. If it requires incorporating into the plan, we'll minute that and it'll be incorporated into the plan.
Thank you. No other questions? We'll go to the recommendations. Again, thank you. An additional item, lease of former
Glinger.
Primary school at Cannonbury. Mr Haswell, is there anything you would like to add to the report?
No, Chair, I hope the report's fairly self-explanatory. Council's a bit in the middle here, in that we're the planning authority, we also own the former Glinger school. There are a number of competing interests, as members will see, in relation to the Cannonbury coalfield. We're looking to find a way forward. Scottish Government are now convening a meeting. There have been a number of reports obtained by the differing parties as to whether or not mining for methane gas affects the coal and vice versa. So I think while the Council would want to be seen to be taking this forward, you'd also want to put a note of caution in and make sure that you weren't encouraging something that had an adverse environmental impact or indeed an adverse impact on the possible future use of the coal in a coal which is clearly there at Cannonbury, as is the gas. So the recommendation, I hope, finds some middle ground, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholson.
Yeah, I'm quite happy to go with the recommendations, but just 3.2.2, where a charge to the lease was from Buccleuch Estates. Am I correct in thinking that they actually turned down before? They applied before and then they were asked before and then they turned it down, the first offer?
That's correct, so there were negotiations back in 2009, 10 and even into 11. Where we were proposing to put Glinger on the market. At that time, the Buccleuch were reminded of their rights of preemption. I don't know what would happen to the negotiations, but clearly there was a letter purportedly from Buccleuch Estate saying they didn't want to exercise the right of preemption. We've then had it on the market since then. But the opinion I received from Professor Rennie quite clearly stated that every time we put in the market, we've got to give Buccleuch the opportunity of exercising their right of preemption. The issue is that a lease for 2 years is not the same as a disposal.
Thank you.
Councillor Cavars.
Thanks, Chair. No, happy with the report. Had a chance to look through it. I think it's saying that New Age is the parent company for the company that's been discussing it with the council. But then we've got Scottish Government, the Coal Authority and SEPA, which are statutory organisations. Then we have Buccleuch Estates themselves. How sure are we that all will sit around the table when it comes to this meeting, and what's the timelines on that? What is the effect if, say, Buccleuch Estates, for instance, wanted to turn up? Does that have an effect on the final outcome? And taking on board that this is a lease agreement, it's not a purchase, and that's what the preemption clause is all about?
The timeline is, unfortunately, Scottish Government, like us, closed down for a wee while. The timeline is, I spoke to Stuart Mackay at the Energy Division and was told that they could have it probably before the end of August. I'm also, my understanding also is that Buccleuch will participate. If they fail to participate, then the statutory agencies will take a view on it. The only people are the Coal Authority and SEPA. They've got to come to decisions as to how the best way to take it forward, as I did do Scottish ministers. My understanding is, and I could be wrong here, that you could actually mine this from south of the border. So it could be a big effect on Dumfries and Galloway, which is why I want us to get it absolutely right and make sure we have everybody singing from the same hymn sheet.
Thanks very much for the reassurances, Chair. Happy to go with the recommendations as stated.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. No problem with the recommendations, but why all of a sudden has Glenger School become the centre of the universe? You know, there's a lot of land round about it. Why all of a sudden is it Glenger School that they want to drill in?
It's in the middle of the coal field, and it's the only bit of ground in that area that is not owned by Buccleuch Estates.